Chapter 51. Yu wrap the fragments of the snow world with space ninjutsu. Integrate into the vast rivers and mountains of the main world. After doing all this, he came to the country of his ancestors. However, they found that this place was surrounded by soldiers from various countries. Yu frowned. Chakra covers them instantly. With a wave of his hand, the space ninjutsu directly swept all the troops. Move to a deserted area. If Yu attacked a group of mortals here, he would be afraid of disturbing Princess Kaguya. The next moment, all the soldiers and troops, they all felt dizzy, and when they woke up, they found themselves in a wilderness. Several huge strange beasts were looking at them with bloodthirsty faces. There was teasing and amusement in his eyes. In Kaguya Heim's hall, Yuaki walked in. The rich scent of the sacred tree wafts towards you. Countless trees in the room continued to spread and grow. Climbing all over the house. Princess Kaguya is like a sleeping beauty princess. She lay quietly on the bed, holding her doll, looking old and decayed. In addition to this, next to Princess Kaguya, there were actually 2 human cubs. There were a bunch of letters on the cub. Yu's body trembled, unable to describe his feelings at the moment. After a long time, he took a deep breath. Use universal pull to suck the human cub and the letter over. The 2 cubs had horns on their heads and were sleeping soundly at this moment. Yu looked at them with a complicated expression. I don't know what to say. With a sigh, Yu stopped thinking about it. Take out Abe Haruaki's notebook. May I? Yu's voice trembled a little. It's been a while, let's do our best. A ball of white light emerged and transformed into Abe Haruaki, and he sighed softly. Yu clenched his fist subconsciously. An almost crazy idea emerged in his heart. If Kaguya-sama really cannot get better, then he didn't know what he would do. He couldn't think about it, nor did he dare to think about it. Abe Haruaki looked at him with a complicated expression and said no more. I saw him making a complicated gesture with his hands. A special energy was drawn out from his body. Into the notebook. Instantly, a large amount of white light appeared in the room. Like a strange burning white fire, it floated towards the trees in the room. Under this white fire, countless trees began to retreat. And finally, this energy began to envelop Kaguya Heim. The wood grain on Kaguya Heim's body began to fade visibly. But her breath was still corrupt. The white soul fire seemed to be fighting against the power of the sacred tree. Yu walked out of the room. He was a real body in the world of the living. If I stay in the room, it will affect the function of ghosts. Yu came out of the room and forced himself to calm down. Use the repulsion of Shinra Tensei to make the 2 cubs float in the air. He began to look at the stack of letters in his hand. The letter is similar to Kaguya Heim's diary. Yu opened the letter and read it. Written on it were Kaguya-ji's beautiful small handwriting. Today, my memory started to become fuzzy, and I seemed to have forgotten a lot of things all of a sudden. I was so afraid that I would forget everything, and eventually forget Yetter, so I prepared to take a notebook and write it down. Princess Kaguya's diary does not have specific dates and is more like an essay, where she writes whatever she thinks of. I am Otsutsuki Kaguya Heim, from a distant planet. It was a world full of cages and shackles, and my life had already been planned. Guardian of the sacred tree, when the planet dries up and becomes barren, collect chakra fruit for the upper Otsutsuki. This should be a normal thing, but I have a different idea from other Otsutsuki. I once asked, why does a good planet have to suck them dry? It would be pitiful to see so many creatures die, right? I later learned from Yetter that my emotion is called sympathy, an emotion that is definitely not something a Otsutsuki should have. My tribe believed that I was a broken Otsutsuki, waiting for my fate to be changed. I became a sacrifice to feed the sacred tree. Later. The first page is gone here. Kaguya-ji seems to have forgotten something. Yu breathed heavily and remained silent for a long time. It turns out that she is very kind. She has always been kind. I picked up a child and named him Yu. He is very good looking and well behaved. When I held him in my arms, he would smile at me. At that moment, I really felt that life was beautiful. Why should I destroy it? But he grows up really fast. It was so fast that before I could react, it was already as tall as me. When I grew up, he stopped sticking to me, and sometimes I felt like I had lost something. But he was so young back then. The second letter ends here. Yu had a complicated expression and turned to the next page. Yetter is beginning to have the aura of a tribe member. I know what this means. Without giving it much thought, I went to communicate with the sacred tree and obtain its power in advance. Transfer the tribe to me. But there is a price to pay for using the power of the sacred tree. My body is decaying and getting older bit by bit, but I can't let Yetter know. I can't let him worry. I started to suppress my changes. My health is deteriorating, I don't know how long I can live. I was thinking of doing something for Yetter. I saw Yetter using a set of sword techniques. I think he should like swords, right? Then I went to a faraway place and made a sword for him. I don't know if he'll like it. Yetter and I went out to play. We went to catch dolls together and met a very cute little girl. She kept praising me, hee. We also went to a haunted house, but it wasn't scary at all, sunder a face. Finally, we went to drink. In fact, the wine doesn't taste good at all. It's spicy and bitter. But drinking it will make me feel dizzy, and I can temporarily forget about my changes. How nice. I don't remember how much I drank. I seemed to be drunk, but I remember Yetter sang a song for me. It was so beautiful. After waking up, I leaned on Yetter's shoulder. The sky was full of fireworks, so beautiful. But I never dared to let Yetter take me out to play again. Because I know he's very tired. Taking me out to play requires him to expend a lot of energy. After all, it's inevitable that Yetter will feel pressured by a master like me. At this point, Kaguya drew a cute little doll. Yuyi's eyes were red, but he couldn't help laughing. I miss Yetter so much. Yetter went out again, he was out for a very long time this time. I had a dream. In the dream, I married someone who looked very much like Yetter. He asked me to wait for him to come back, but when will he come back? My health is getting worse and worse. I'm afraid I won't be able to wait for Yetter. I'm so scared. I'm afraid that after I die, no one will take care of Yetter, and no one will be with Yetter. How lonely Yetter will be then. I went to find the sacred tree again. With the help of the sacred tree, I used yin-yang escape to create 2 children. Holding them is like holding Yetter in the past, but it feels different. Yetter is still cuter. I hope they can take good care of Yetter for me, so that after I leave, Yetter won't be lonely anymore. This is a complete letter of several pages. Even so, many parts are still written discontinuously, as if a sentence takes a long time to think. The rest of the letter was filled with fragmented words and confusing logic, and it seemed that it was written when the writer was not very conscious. There are still many places on the letter where the handwriting is blurred and wet, as if I cried while writing it. There is a page filled with death. Another page, filled with night. There was also a painting of a big tree with a woman on it, and the tree tied the woman up. Those pages full of death. Yuyi couldn't imagine how desperate Kaguya felt when she wrote these. Just like the woman in the painting, she was bound by Otsutsuki all her life, and in the end, she was unable to escape. Chapter 52. Yuyi put the letter away, stood there, closed his eyes and remained silent for a long time. Time passes by second, just like Yuyi's mind and soul that continued to fall into the valley. The 2 children, Hago Romo and Hamura, also woke up. Maybe it's because he's floating in the air with repulsion and feels uncomfortable. As soon as they woke up, they started crying loudly. Shut up! Afraid of disturbing Kaguya, Yuyi frowned and chuckled softly. But children don't care about these things, and this will only make them quarrel even more fiercely. Yuyi had no choice but to pick them up. Sure enough, the 2 children stopped quarreling. Instead, she looked at him curiously with her big eyes. Yuyi's eyes have circles of mysterious ripples. This is the power given by the sacred tree, the innate Rinnegan. In the original comic, Hago Romo was born with the Rinnegan. Yuyi's expression was somewhat complicated. Back then, he wanted to obtain the Rinnegan and save Princess Kaguya. I had to embark on a path of no return. Although he later used Tsukuyomi to blur that memory, and asked Kaguya to wait for him to come back. But if that scene was really the last time I saw Kaguya, then he will never be able to forgive himself. But at this time, Yuyi inherited all of this from birth. Hamura's eyes are the same white eyes as Kaguya. This is the power that comes from Otsutsuki. His hair is silver white, the same color as Kaguya's hair. The 2 of them were blessed with an extremely large innate chakra. And just at this moment, Abe Haruaki floated out of the room. How's it going? Yuyi asked, his voice a little hoarse. I'm awake, but... Abe Haruaki answered. His face looked hesitant and strange. Yuyi's heart, which had been at ease, was immediately lifted up again. Go in and take a look for yourself. Abe Haruaki sighed. Yuyi carried Yuyi and Hamura into the room. Kaguya Hime was sitting on the bed. Her long silver hair fell quietly and spread over her shoulders. She has a thin figure and a delicate face. The grain of the tree had completely disappeared from her body. Her breathing returned to normal, without any trace of abnormality remaining. Yu Yuruaki walked closer step by step, staring blankly at the figure. There are some worries about gains and losses, but also a kind of joy of surviving a disaster. He said nothing more. Just walk over and hug her. Until I really held her body in my arms, holding the fragrance and the jade in my arms, I feel the softness and warmth. Yuyi was sure that all this was true. However, Kaguya's body was trembling. The next moment, he was pushed away. Who are you? Her eyes flashed with confusion and she asked softly. Yuyi was stunned and speechless for a moment. She has been eroded by the sacred tree for too long and has lost many of her memories. The ghost of Abe Haruaki floated over and explained. Can it be restored? Yuyi asked. It's hard to say. It depends on her luck. Abe Haruaki had a complicated expression, Kaido. That Otsutsuki clan member has also been purged from the body, but he managed to escape. You need to be careful from now on. It's okay. He can't escape. A cold murderous intent flashed across Yuyi's eyes. Abe Haruaki nodded, said no more, and poured into his notebook. Kaguya was still staring blankly at one place. There was a flash of confusion in his eyes from time to time. You raised me. After hesitating for a long time, Yuyi still spoke. Kaguya looked over, he first looked at Yuyi, then at himself, who was about the same size as him. Nerve. She glanced at Yuyi and turned her head away. Keep staring ahead in a daze, Yuya. Yuyi didn't know how to explain all this. Should I tell her that I grew too fast because of the added attribute points? These two children. Yuyi smiled bitterly and prepared to take out the feather robe and Hamura to explain. I see, you mean to say that you are my husband, this is our child, right? Kaguya's eyes were filled with amusement and mockery, as if she saw through Yuyi's tricks at a glance. I mean, I was raised by you like these two kids. How come you don't remember anything at all? Yuyi smiled bitterly, looking a little disheveled. I was picked up by you just like them. Yuyi still tried to explain. So when did I pick you up? Kaguya asked with some amusement, although she was still a little confused, she had gradually regained some spirit. 3 years ago. Good. Kaguya. Kaguya shook her head and stopped looking at him. It's nerves indeed. She lowered her head, then stared blankly, with a look of despair on her face. How come I just woke up in a daze and met someone who is not in his right mind? She muttered quietly. Yuya. Yu Yuruaki didn't know what to say. It seems like Kaguya won't believe anything you say now. If I continue talking, I'm afraid I'll treat him like a fool. Fortunately, the crisis on her has been resolved, and there is still a long time to go. Okay, since you're so pretty, I believe you when you say you're my husband. Seeing that Yuyi seemed to be worried about something, Kaguya felt a little upset for some reason. She waved her hand and said. By the way, what's your name? After thinking for a while, Kaguya asked. Da. Otsutsuki, Hanabi. Yuyi was somewhat uncomfortable with Kaguya-sama like this. Kaguya seems to be as domineering as before, but apart from that, it is also a bit more generous, proactive, and free and easy. Yuya. Yuya. Kaguya chewed on the name gently, with confusion in her eyes. For some reason, she felt an inexplicable familiarity. After thinking for a while, she couldn't remember, so Kaguya simply shook her head and stopped thinking about it. This name is not bad, the person who gave you this name must be a genius. She said aloud, not trying to hide her admiration. Yuya. Yuyi, right? Then when did we get married? Kaguya blinked her big eyes and asked curiously. At this point, she was already certain that the man in front of her was really her husband. Otherwise, why would I feel inexplicably familiar with his aura, name, appearance, and everything about him? Plus the hug at the beginning made her blush and her heart beat fast. And if he wasn't her closest person, how could he be by her side as soon as she woke up? Kaguya couldn't help but give herself a thumbs up for her own cleverness. We are not married. Yi was a little overwhelmed. Hey? Not married, then how come you have a child? Kaguya looked incredulous. Then he looked at Yi with an expression as if he was looking at a scumbag. You don't want to take responsibility, do you? She was full of vigilance. Oh yeah. I didn't. Yuki just felt that he couldn't do anything about it. Chapter 53. That's good. Kaguya curled her lips and breathed a sigh of relief. Yi, right? Since you are my husband, take me out to play. It's too boring here. Princess Kaguya stretched, revealing a large area of white and delicate skin on her waist. Good. Yi nodded. Just as I was about to turn around and set up, then he found Kaguya opening her arms towards him. What are you standing there for? Hug me. Kaguya said. Ah. Okay. Yi picked up Kaguya. Princess Kaguya was like a sloth, with her long legs wrapped around Yi's waist. I seem to have slept for a long time, and now I have no strength in my body. She talked to herself. A hint of guilt flashed through Yi's heart. Holding Kaguya, he walked out of the room. Kaguya rested her head gently on Yi's shoulder. Smelling this familiar scent, she felt inexplicably at ease. Yi decided to take her to every place they had been to before. She always remembers it bit by bit. Although I don't want her to remember those unpleasant memories, but they've been through so much together. How can you just forget it? In the room, the two babies looked at each other. They seemed to have been forgotten. When Yi took Kaguya to every place, Princess Kaguya's eyes still flashed with thought and confusion from time to time. During this time, Kaguya was like a little child, always asking Yi to hold her. Never came down once. Yi could only sigh. Fortunately, there is still a lot of time, so take it slow. A deserted area, there were ripples in the space, as if it was broken at this moment. A dark hole appeared, and a figure fell out from it. He was breathing weakly, looked exhausted, and had multiple injuries on his body. He is Otsutsuki Hiki. Ever since the last battle with Yi through Kaguya's body, after the mental trauma, he never recovered. And just now, he was inexplicably attacked by a group of onmyoji ghosts. It was even more of a wound. At this time, but he managed to escape with great difficulty. Otsutsuki Oya. He said with hatred. He didn't know the names of those yin-yang masters. So at this time I could only get angry at Yi. But I think that group of onmyojis should also be related to Yi. He was about to succeed in possessing Kaguya, the vessel. But I never expected such an accident to happen. At this time, he could only find a place to recover from his injuries quietly. Find a new container. He walked forward with a bit of frustration. I have greeted Otsutsuki Yi 100 times in my heart. But the next moment, a figure appeared faintly in front of him, blocking his way. He seemed to have returned from ancient times, floating 3 feet above the ground. He was dressed in white, with an indifferent look and a timeless aura. Otsutsuki was somewhat stunned. How come this person appeared while I was cursing? He turned around and was about to walk back. But another Yi had already stood there. He activated the 6 paths mode, and the golden immortal robe surged up. 12 truth-seeking balls slowly rotated behind him. Evolution of vitality and extinction. Boom! The earth suddenly shook. On the left, there is a Senju Buddha statue that is who knows how many miles long. Rising from the ground. Its huge body covered the sky and the moon, emitting a creepy and terrifying aura. On the other side, a towering golden giant also appeared. He is the complete form of Susanoo. With every step it takes, the world trembles. Otsutsuki Hanya. How did you know I was here? Hiki shouted loudly with great anger. He clearly used Yomi Hirasaka to escape, in the middle, just in case, they changed their positions countless times. How did he keep locking onto him despite all this? Yi was too disdainful to answer. As early as when Abe Haruaki was clearing the power of the sacred tree in Hiki in Kaguya's body, he then extended his perception to the entire ancestral country. Otsutsuki escaped with one move, and the space fluctuations it brought, he sensed it clearly. Follow along with your avatar in Sage mode. Always sense the fluctuations coming from space. The reason why I waited until he arrived before taking action was because I was afraid of disturbing Kaguya. Yi had no intention of explaining. He has no extra words for the dead. A cold murderous intent flashed across the 6 Magadama Rinnegan. The next moment, the sky suddenly darkened and became low. It was like a layer of dark clouds covering the entire sky. I saw a huge meteorite that had covered the entire sky. And above that meteorite, there is another meteorite that is several times larger. This is the eye technique of Rinnegan. New beginning. And Yi who turned on 6 paths mode, the truth-seeking ball behind me dances, in an instant, all 12 truth-seeking balls merged into one, forming an expanding truth-seeking ball. The power of creation and destruction is constantly evolving within it. On the other side, the complete Susanoo drew her bow and drew her arrow. The black Amaterasu flame is attached to it, condense the arrow of Indra. The Buddha statue on the top formed by wood style covers the sky and the moon. Millions of arms dance together at this moment. At the same time, they grabbed Otsutsuki in one move. Otsutsuki's eyes were red with anger. A strong sense of death crisis filled his whole body. With so many powerful attacks, even he would surely die. He wanted to use Yomi Hirasaka to escape, but such strong chakra gathered there, it has already disturbed this space. What's more, Yi used space ninjutsu to block it. He wanted to fight to the death, and the golden cross in his right eye emitted a bright light. Countless strange tattoos spread across his body. However, the next moment, his movements suddenly came to an end. His expression, movements, breath, and the movement of his chakra, everything is completely frozen at this moment. It was like his time was suspended at this moment. Even though it was only a brief moment, but at this moment, he had missed his last chance. All attacks came at once. No. Boom. The power of destruction erupted at this moment. A powerful shock wave swept across the world. A huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky. The very center of the force even directly formed a dark gravitational field. The world trembles at this moment. Does it look good? Thousands of feet high in the sky, Yi asked softly while carrying Princess Kaguya on his back. Wow! What a huge mushroom cloud! Kaguya was a little confused, but also a little excited. After they wandered around their homeland and found it boring, Yi brought her here. I remember. I think I saw something even better looking before. Kaguya's eyes flashed with confusion and thought, and she muttered, I remember, it seemed to be colorful. I see. Yi whispered. The next moment, the huge mushroom cloud that spread across the sky and earth changed again. This time, it became colorful and different colors. The mushroom cloud began to disperse and eventually turned into countless small mushroom clouds. Fireworks and colorful lights, scattered like fireworks in the sky and earth, so beautiful. Kaguya murmured, with an indescribable confusion in her eyes. Her white pupils reflected the extremely bright color, and she was in a daze. The scattered light shone on her face, sometimes bright and sometimes dim. Breathtakingly beautiful and radiantly beautiful, just as it always was. Kaguya stared blankly for a long time, and after a while, her body trembled. It seemed as if something crystal clear was mixed into his eyes. What's wrong? Yi asked softly. Kaguya didn't say anything, but just wrapped her arms tightly around Yi's neck. Bury your head in his neck. I couldn't see her expression clearly. After a while, she whispered, thank you. Chapter 54. Yi's body trembled. For a moment, thousands of words were stuck in my throat. I want to say something, but I can't. His eyes were a little hazy, as if covered with a layer of fog. He didn't say anything more. But look into the distance. It's still glorious there, but in the end, it was bleak, and it seemed that everything had settled. One era is lonely, another era is rising. Over thousands of years and countless cycles, the world has ushered in unprecedented changes. The rumor that a witch haunts the tiny ancestral country has spread among the world. Thousands of troops were approaching the city, but they were inexplicably transferred to a desolate area by a sudden force. The huge beast smashed the besieging army into pieces. There are only a few survivors, and the world is shocked. According to legend, there is a demon woman hiding in the ancestral country, and it is also allied with demon beasts, making it a well-deserved demon country. For a time, rumors spread and people were in panic. At this moment, all countries formed an alliance tacitly. They wanted to jointly send troops to attack their ancestral country. At the same time, Yi also got his mission. It is detected that the world you are in will undergo a major change, and the world mission is being released. Task 1, sweep across the 6 directions and 8 wastelands. You cannot participate in the battle, and become the master of heaven and earth. Task 2, develop the technology tree and advance the world by 2 technological eras. Task 3, the world is about to collapse, solve the crisis of the sacred tree. Mission completed, reward, chakra fruit. Yetter, what's wrong? Kaguya asked softly. Under a sakura flower tree, Yuyi and Kaguya walked hand in hand. After walking for a while, Yuyi suddenly stopped where he was, and seemed to be in a daze for a moment. Ah, nothing. Yuyi smiled slightly, kaido. At this time, a breeze blew gently. A sakura flower fluttered and danced, swaying and falling into Kaguya-hime's hair. Yuyi gently stretched out his hand and naturally caught the sakura flower. From a distance, it looked like he was touching Kaguya-hime's head. Kaguya's delicate face flashed a blush. The next moment, Yuyi put the sakura flower in Kaguya's ear. At the same time, he ruffled her hair. It'll be all right, he murmured. I am here. If the seal of the sacred tree is broken, the vitality of the world will be cut off. This is an unavoidable obstacle. Yuyi used the TNG algorithm to make several calculations, and the results he obtained were the same as what Yin and Yang described. In order to prevent the vitality of the planet from being sucked away by the sacred tree, there must be a person who becomes one with the sacred tree. No matter who you are, your final fate is to lose yourself. In the previous life, in the original work, Kaguya merged with the sacred tree. And this time, Yuyi couldn't let this happen again. World War is about to break out, but no one expected it. It was the Xia country that took the lead in launching the offensive. The country of ancestors attacked with lightning speed, the first to attack the country of others, which was the leader in the previous encirclement and suppression of the country of ancestors. They launched a blitzkrieg, a night attack. It caught that country off guard. Moreover, they were well equipped and ultimately won a great victory. The alliance of countries was leaderless and fell into panic. At the same time, the Xia country sent diplomats to show goodwill to other countries. On the one hand, they tried to please them and delay the time for them to officially launch the war, while devouring and digesting the other country. At the same time, Tianyu Xingyi's second pavilion, with the help of its influence in various countries, secretly carry out cultural exports, promote love and peace, and wear down the fighting spirit of various countries. He also used his economic status in various countries to incite powerful officials and nobles to rebel. The countries are facing internal and external troubles, making it difficult for them to form an alliance. The motherland is developing rapidly and growing stronger day by day. 3 months later, the Xia kingdom divided its troops into 7 groups and launched wars against neighboring countries at the same time. Night attack, fire attack, flooding, luring the tiger away from the mountain, and sneaking through Chenkang. The man who led the troops displayed amazing military talent. With the help of favorable time, place, and people, divide the battlefield into 7 parts. He fought against many enemies alone and against many countries, shocking the world. And he himself shined brightly in the war. He is a master of swordsmanship, coming and going without a trace. The figure was ethereal and as fast as the wind. He can fight against an army with his own strength. He is the undisputed leader in this war. But when people asked him his name, he shook his head and said nothing. Because he has no name, he had already been taken away by the Supreme Being. People had no choice but to call him, the Swift-Wind Swordsman. 1 year later, the Xia kingdom had devoured all the surrounding forces. It officially became a world power in one leap. At the same time, declare war on the world. The major dynasties watched coldly, and no one had any intention of taking the initiative. As a dynasty with a long history, it is natural for them to be proud of themselves. They just regarded the words of this newly rising superpower as its boast. However, the speed at which the ancestral country launched a war was much faster than expected. In the same year, he declared war on the nearest British Empire. And at an almost incredible speed, it is advancing rapidly and unstoppable. Before anyone could react in time, countless cities of the British Empire were captured. When the cavalry of the motherland set foot on the palace of the British Empire, the commander of the Zuzi kingdom took out a strange mechanical prop that looked like a factory. He pointed the long tube at a warrior who was resisting stubbornly. Times have changed, he spoke lightly. Boom! The next moment, a wisp of white smoke spewed out from the muzzle. There was a thunderous sound, and the warrior fell to the ground. The weapons of the ancestral country have long been updated. After Yuyi came up with the design drawings, the technology naturally made a breakthrough. Firearms were created. And this gunshot seemed to mean the arrival of a new era. 3 years later. We are still children, father asked us to go to the battlefield. A barren land with thousands of miles of prairie fire, the border between the motherland and the American Empire. Inside the carriage of the ancestral army, a little boy who was only 3 or 4 years old covered his face with his hands, looking as if he had lost all hope in life. Yet, I guess he's going out to play with his mother again. Another little boy spoke up. He has silver hair and white eyes. I always feel like we picked it up. The first little boy muttered. He had brown hair and a pair of wavy eyes that looked depressed. Your Highness, the war is about to begin. If something goes wrong later, I will escort the 2 princes to escape at the cost of my life. A general outside the carriage spoke up. At this time, thousands of troops have gathered here. The military formation composed of countless armies is majestic and the morale is high. From a distance, it looks like dark clouds covering the city. Bang bang bang! The clarion call of war has sounded at this moment, and the war is about to break out. When the 2 armies met, the Zokuo country was the first to come up with the black technology, the blasting cannon. Boom! 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 The black ammunition bombarded the American Empire's army. Exploded among the group of soldiers. The powerful blasting force directly blasted off the shields held high by the soldiers. The enemy suffered heavy casualties. At the same time, take out firearms and keep shooting. As soon as the war began, it seemed to be deviating towards the direction of the ancestral country. At this time, from the American Empire, surprisingly, several unusually large beasts appeared and came to the fore. Even if the ancestral country is holding up war machines and blasting cannons. But in front of such a huge beast, it still seemed not enough. Over the past 3 years, the country of ancestors has already established a great reputation. All countries surrendered or were defeated. Nowadays, there are very few people who dare to be enemies with our motherland. The American Empire had not surrendered at this time and did have something to rely on. But I don't know when I found a way to communicate with the strange beasts. Chapter 55. These strange beasts are extremely powerful, with thick skin and flesh. Withstanding the mortars and numerous gunpowder attacks, they charged towards the army of the ancestral country. In an instant, the strange beast was like a tiger entering a flock of sheep, and with a random attack, countless soldiers were knocked down. The situation is not good, quickly cover His Highness, and His Highness the Second Prince, retreat. The general yelled, but did not panic. Instead, he quickly issued orders to respond. At the same time, he drew his sword from its sheath and rushed towards the strange beast. In this era when firearms are popular in our motherland, he still insisted on using the sword, because this was the sword technique passed down to him by the Supreme Being. From then on, he devoted himself to this path. He also realized his own way from the original Kuang Feng sword technique. Self-created Gale sword technique. From that day on, although he had no name, everyone called him, the Wind Swordsman. Rich wind elements burst out from his body, even though the beast's momentum was several times stronger than his. But he still moves forward. Shua, a sword beam shot up into the sky and slashed at the strange beast in front of it. The strange beast noticed him, roared, and started fighting with him. Oh no, the first and second princes are missing. Countless soldiers suddenly shouted, and for a moment they were panicked. Because the carriage was empty. If anything happens to the first and second princes, we will die. This is more terrible than losing the war. They would rather die in the mouth of the strange beast than let the other 2 get into trouble. At this moment, everyone has a look of sadness, regret and self-blame on their faces. At this moment, thousands of feet high in the sky, Hago Romo and Hamura used repulsion to float their bodies at the same time. Looking at the strange beast that was as big as a mountain, there was excitement in his eyes. There seemed to be a few solitary monsters here. I said, his eyes rippling with interest. Yes, it should be the little monster that father mentioned. Hamura nodded and said. Then we are Ultraman. Hamura, this one is yours, and the others are mine. After Yi finished speaking, he flew down quickly. Ah! Damn it! Hamura hurriedly caught up. Shinra Tensei! Yi shouted loudly. He flew downwards, and a strong wind blew up. He used a palm technique that came down from the sky. An incomparable repulsive force erupted at this moment. He actually pressed the strange beast to the ground. The earth collapsed in a circle at this moment. The strange beast was about to let out an angry roar and break free from the repulsive force. But the next moment, it smelled a familiar scent. This breath has been engraved into the depths of its soul and its blood. It will never forget. That day, I enlightened their wisdom and led them out of the ruined world. Give them new meaning. That figure that seemed to be the creator and destroyer of the world. Yes. I can't be wrong, it's this breath. There is a lingering smell of that supreme being. Almost the next moment, the strange beast lay on the ground. He trembled, not daring to move, and there was a flattering look in his eyes. Is this little monster so weak? Yi asked curiously. Except for this one, all the other beasts, almost all of them turned against their own side at this moment. Like little dogs, they surrounded Hago Romo Hamura. With a flattering attitude. Your Highness, are so mighty. Your Highness, just a shake of your tiger body will make all the beasts submit. All the soldiers saw Hago Romo Hamura falling from the sky. They couldn't help but cry with joy, and then watched the performance of the strange beasts. I couldn't help but be surprised and praised loudly at the same time. Hago Romo Hamura said calmly. Although they were somewhat confused about the situation, it did not stop them from imitating the usual behavior of a certain unscrupulous father. She nodded modestly. This expression is somewhat similar. In the ensuing war, with the participation of 2 children and the help of strange beasts, basically, it was unstoppable and one-sided. When the news of 2 naughty kids on the battlefield was mentioned, all the countries that had not surrendered could not help but turn pale at the mention of them. Later on, basically, as soon as Hago Romo Hamura appeared, they surrendered automatically. Soon, with the addition of Hago Romo and Hamura, the wars in various countries were quickly settled. The cavalry of the motherland has traveled to every corner of the world. The world has ushered in true unification. An unprecedented superpower stands tall in this world. This year, Yi reached the highest position and became the common ruler of heaven and earth, with all nations coming to pay tribute. He changed the country's name to Daxia and made Princess Kaguya the goddess of Mao. The whole country worked together to build a statue of the goddess of Mao. At the same time, the chakra fruit is about to mature. The world crisis is about to come again. Yetter, you seem to have a lot on your mind lately. Kaguya asked. No way, the world has ushered in a truly prosperous and peaceful era, why would I have any worries? Yi scratched Kaguya's nose and spoke softly. At the same time, he picked her up and put her on the bed. Just getting ready to get up, Kaguya put her arms around Yi's neck, looking into Yi's eyes, he seemed to want to say something but stopped himself. What's wrong? Do you want to hear a story today? Yi asked with some amusement. After hesitating for a while, Kaguya nodded. Okay, Yi agreed. The next moment, ripples appeared in the space. 2 little boys who were fighting in the next room were moved here. Your mother wants to hear a story, tell it quickly. Yi and Hamura looked at each other, looking confused as if they had seen a ghost. I was the one who told you the story before, but now it's time for you to fulfill your filial duty. Yi said lightly. But you only told me that once. Hago Romo wailed. But we are only 3 years old. Hamura was desperate. Yi glanced at them. You are so young, but you don't listen. Hamura and Yi swallowed, they were still very afraid of Yi. At this moment, they could only rack their brains to think of a story that Yi had told them before. Once upon a time there was a mountain. Yi gritted her teeth and began. There is a temple on the mountain. Hamura connection. Once upon a time, there was a mountain. Yi continued. Is this all you know? Yi frowned. But you said that before. Yi wailed, wanting to cry but having no tears. Change it. Uyed. Abba. Then they hemmed and hawed and made up a story. Pfjetter, don't make things difficult for them, they are still young. Kaguya smiled, a bright smile. After driving Hago Romo Hamura away, Yi and Kaguya were the only ones left in the room again. It's not small anymore. Yi shook his head. If this is the only strength, in the future, if something happens to me, how can I protect Princess Kaguya? Even though Hago Romo Hamura was created based on the power of the sacred tree and the Otsutsuki clan, but compared to Yi, his growth rate is still too slow. At this moment, Yi felt the great changes in the world, which were caused by the ripening of the chakra fruit. Chapter 56. An invisible energy wave spread out gently like a ripple. That is the breath of the chakra fruit. Kaguya didn't feel the energy fluctuations, most of her power was distributed to Yui, and Hamura. The Sharingan covering her forehead has now closed. At this point, her perception was even worse than Hago Romo Hamura's. Yui remained calm and coaxed her to sleep. He then used space ninjutsu and came to the location of the sacred tree. And coming here, Yui unexpectedly discovered an acquaintance. That was the remnant soul of the last Onmyoji of the branch house, the saintess of the Tiansheng dynasty. And next to her was Abe Kiyoshige. The saint is as graceful as ever. But her figure was slightly darker than before. The country of ancestors was able to achieve great unification quickly, rather than being weak. The Tiansheng dynasty has never taken any action, which has a lot to do with it. After the Xia kingdom devoured all the surrounding forces, they have never taken action against the Tiansheng dynasty. But the Tiansheng dynasty itself is one of the 6 great powers. The first to surrender voluntarily. Yui finally gave this country the highest autonomy. After leaving the Snowwind realm, Abe Kingsu went to the Tiansheng dynasty. Stay with this girl with a broken soul, but now they came together. At the same time, Abe Haruaki also floated out of the notebook. His eyes were vicissitudes and decayed, and he looked at Yui with a complicated expression. It seems to be witnessing something. Have you thought it through? Do you want to become one with the sacred tree? This may cause you to lose your own will. Abe Haruaki asked. Does it matter if you never decide? You were sure I would go down this path when you first met me. Yui glanced at him indifferently, with obvious sarcasm in his eyes. In fact, the original choice should be the woman who was corrupted by the sacred tree. Abe Haruaki remained non-committal. But then you showed up and it turned out you were a better fit than her. Oh. Yui sneered. In the previous life, Kaguya could take this path, as expected, it is related to this group of Onmyojis. Abe Haruaki is the lucky son of the previous era. In a sense, it represents part of the will of this planet. This made Kaguya fall in love with the planet and willingly merge with the sacred tree. This is the self-salvation of the world's will, and Abe Haruaki may be the person who is fanning the flames behind the scenes. For example, secretly controlling a few mortals and making them show kindness to Princess Kaguya. Later, fearing that Kaguya would lose control, the world will begin to divide Kaguya's power. The birth of a child once again affected the Hago Romo Hamura, causing them to seal Kaguya Hime on the moon. The Gamamaru that influenced the Hago Romo and Hamura came from the Snowwind realm. Is Abe Haruaki behind it? It is also possible that the will of the world shifted at this moment, from Abe Haruaki to Gamamaru. That's why Gamamaru gained the ability to predict. That woman is blessed by nature. She is originally from the Otsutsuki clan. They have a natural resistance to the assimilation of the sacred tree. Abe Haruaki confessed. You should be glad you didn't find her. Yui just glanced at him indifferently. As for Abe Haruaki, he saved Kaguya after all, so Yui couldn't say much. But there was a kind of coldness in his eyes that had never been seen before, and a hint of deep hidden madness. Even Abe Haruaki was slightly moved. I'm not wrong. Abe Haruaki said after a long time. No one is wrong. Kaido, is Kaguya wrong? Why do I have to endure all this? He clearly saved the world, but in the end he ended up being sealed. Yui said no more, floated to the top of the sacred tree. The chakra fruit further exudes a seductive luster. Madara's colorful colors shine through. The power contained in it is immense, it is the complete 10 tails chakra, and the power of the Rinnegan. Become one with the sacred tree, not only do you need to eat the chakra fruit, it also requires one to have a strong will and physique. Able to withstand the power coming from the sacred tree. Otherwise, any ordinary person would lose control in an instant and would be of no help. And those who can bear all this at present, there is only Yui, and it can only be Yui. Princess Kaguya's power has already been divided into Hago Romo Hamura. And Hago Romo Hamura was still a child at this time and had not fully grown up. At this time, only Yui can take on the power of the sacred tree. And control it, stop its endless plunder and growth. Yui's conditions are even more unique. Why did Abe Haruaki say Yui was more suitable? It was because of the power of time that Yui demonstrated in a previous battle. He can use the eye technique of time to delay the corrosion of his will by the sacred tree. Just like Kakashi in the original story, he has a manjiki that never closes. However, the cost is 10,000 times higher than that. For Yui, it will be almost impossible for him to use his full strength in the future. This is why Yi is eager to complete this world mission. He was afraid that he would not be able to protect Kaguya in the future. And Yi Hamura is obviously unreliable and there is a potential risk of him becoming a rebellious son. So I had to get another chakra fruit and give it to Kaguya. Even without him in the future, Kaguya should be safe. In addition, the chakra fruit originally belonged to Kaguya, and she continued to divide her power. At this time, Yi swallowed the chakra fruit that originally belonged to her in order to seal the sacred tree. I still feel guilty deep down. In Yi's opinion, this one gift from the system is a compensation to Kaguya. After all, she shouldn't be so weak. Yi's thoughts raced, and everything in the past flashed through his mind. This was supposed to be your chakra fruit. Looking at the chakra fruit in front of him, Yi murmured. The image of Kaguya, who was born powerful and should be invincible in this world, flashed through my mind. I will repay you when I get the one given by the system. Yi whispered. Then, without further hesitation, he picked up the chakra fruit and swallowed it. Instantly, an incredibly rich chakra burst out in the body. Yi's eyes, at this moment, from the original 6 Magadama Rinnegan, it evolved into the 9 Magadama Sharingan. At this moment, 9 mysterious black Magatama appeared in his eyes, shining brightly. The circles of ripples seemed to contain the power of creation and destruction. One look at it makes people sink into it unconsciously. As for why the Sharingan didn't grow on the forehead, instead, it appeared in both eyes. Yi didn't know what was going on. This can only be attributed to the system's transformation of him. When the powerful pupil power cannot be contained by the eyes, it will appear on the forehead. But before that, the system's attribute points continued to increase the physical strength. Yi took it over. After eating the chakra fruit, Yi felt an almost endless amount of chakras spreading in his body. These are the most original chakras. At the same time, a stream of information about the bloodline network and its use came naturally. At this moment, Yi gained more enlightenment. At the same time, the seal of the sacred tree was broken. Boom! An incomparable energy burst out at this moment. The sky suddenly darkened, as if covered by a layer of black curtain, stretching for thousands of miles. The vitality of the world, unexpectedly at this moment, began to gather towards the sacred tree. Visible to the naked eye, within 100 miles of the sacred tree, countless flowers, plants, and trees withered at this moment. Even the mountains and rivers began to tremble. It was as if some energy was absorbed. There are also some young creatures. While running, suddenly, his body was sucked dry and soon he turned into a skeleton. The sacred tree began to grow visibly. The whole world has changed dramatically at this moment. It is foreseeable that in the next few days, a scene like the end of the world will be staged on this planet. The forces of yin and yang and the 5 elements will be completely chaotic, causing earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, magma, and tornadoes. Until finally, the energy was completely absorbed and it turned into a barren planet. Only this towering tree remains. Chapter 57. The sacred tree has broken through the seal. Abe Haruaki looked at the seal being broken and muttered to himself at the growing sacred tree. He had experienced this kind of scene thousands of years ago. Seeing it again now, I couldn't help but tremble. The sacred tree's endless plunder of life is simply a disaster for the world. At this moment, he could only look towards Yi, waiting for his choice. After all, the only one who can prevent this disaster now is Yi. The same is true for Abe Kiyoshige and the saint. With complicated expressions, they all looked at Yi. And Yi was still floating in the air, adapting to the power of the chakra fruit. The power in his body surged and seemed endless. After feeling it for a while, he was almost immersed in it. After a long time, when he had fully adapted, he saw the sacred tree break through the seal. In a short period of time, it almost grew a circle larger, and at the same time a large amount of vitality was absorbed at this moment. He didn't say anything more. Instead, he floated directly to the center of the sacred tree. He took a step forward, and his whole body went directly into the body of the sacred tree. Slowly disappearing under the wood grain of the sacred tree, as if it had merged into one with the sacred tree at this moment. It must succeed. Abe Haruaki murmured. Thousands of years of sacrifice, thousands of years of waiting, just for this glimmer of hope today. The saint also had a complicated look. The scene before her seemed to let her see, the scene where every member of the tribe nurtures the sacred tree with his own body, including herself. She understood the despair and pain of being trapped in the sacred tree. Life will be sucked out, and one's consciousness will continue to decay, and eventually be assimilated and fall into silence. So at this moment, the only emotions she showed were complexity and admiration. The sacred tree is still growing and becoming stronger. Every minute and every second, a huge amount of vitality is absorbed. That comes from flowers, plants, trees, mountains, rivers, and lakes, and from the natural world. As the sacred tree continued to devour, it seemed as if a layer of darkness was expanding outward across the earth. All the areas shrouded in darkness began to lose vitality. However, Yi was inside the body of the sacred tree, and there seemed to be no reaction at all. Hamura, did you notice anything? Thousands of miles away from the Great Xia Imperial Court, Hago Romo asked. Noise? What noise? Could it be the noise made by mother and father? Hamura said confusedly. No, seriously, I feel like the natural energy of the world is slipping away. Yi frowned and said. What could possibly happen? If anything, we still have father to take care of. It's useless to worry about it. Hamura didn't care. All right. Yui was finally convinced, although she still felt a little uneasy. In another room, Kaguya was also feeling uneasy. When she realized the world was changing, she woke up. After waking up, I found that Yui was not around. This anxiety reached its peak. Yetter. She whispered, however, at this time, she had already dispersed her strength. He can't even use space-time ninjutsu. I can only wait anxiously for Yui to return. All the people of the Great Xia Imperial Court, at this moment, everyone was immersed in the welfare benefits brought by the Imperial Court. They did not know that there was an unprecedented crisis is breaking out. When Abe Haruaki thought the fusion was going to fail, finally, the sacred tree stopped absorbing natural energy. Its endless expansion and growth seemed to be paused at this moment, and the earth stopped shaking. The next moment, the sacred tree that covered the sky and reached the clouds began to shrink slowly. Countless branches and leaves began to shrink, and finally, they transformed into Yui. Yuki was dressed in white clothes that were whiter than snow, with wood grain all over his body, and his aura was even more complex and strange. Although the next moment, everything returned to normal. You succeeded? Abe Haruaki asked. Yui nodded. Even Abe Haruaki couldn't help but be slightly moved by the affirmative answer. My mission is over, but your future may be even harder than my time. He said. 1,000 years of waiting is already too long. At this moment, a weathered and decayed aura began to spread from his body. In this era, you will go forward alone, bearing the weight of the sacred tree alone. There will be no one behind you, and you will have a harder and more painful life than anyone else. I seem to have seen that day. Abe Haruaki murmured, and finally looked at Yui deeply, his eyes full of pity. After saying all this, an ethereal aura emanated from him. His body was a little hazy and erratic. At this moment, pieces of light rain flew up from his body. He gradually faded away, gradually disappeared, and his life came to an end. From now on, I'll have to rely on you alone. The saint girl spoke softly, and her body began to flicker. She didn't know who she was talking to. It seemed as if he was talking to Yui, or to Abe Kiyoyuki, or more like he was talking to himself. Finally, she turned around and touched Abe Kiyoshi's head. She looked at Yui again. There was an indescribable look in his eyes. She didn't say anything more, and bowed slightly to Yui. The body gradually faded away. 1,000 years of waiting, just for this moment, they seemed to be witnesses of the times. Say goodbye to their era. As they said, they had fought bloody battles and fought in the starry sky. It took sacrifices from generation to generation for thousands of years to bring about this day. This is their mission, and now, they saw in Yui a path that had never been taken before. He will be alone, bearing all the hopes of this age. He was like a cage, with shackles on his back. There was no one behind him, and he was alone, fighting against the darkness. Yui didn't say anything else, but he felt a little lost in his heart. Watch them fade away in the rain of light. It seems to imply the complete desolation of an era. Under the influence of the sacred tree, the weather changed rapidly. In a short period of time, there is already a cloud of gloom here. I don't know when, but it started to rain heavily, as if washing away all the dirt and vanity in this world. Abe Kiyoshige also left, rejecting Yui's invitation. She held the little fox alone. Walking on a snowy road, in the drifting rain, her body inevitably looked a little thin. But she held her back straight. She was really the only one left, so she had no choice but to keep walking. Yi returned to the imperial court. Princess Kaguya was already waiting there, looking at the aura on Yi's body. She seemed to understand it all. Especially Yi's eyes, the pair of 9 Magatama Sharingan that can never be closed. It symbolizes power, but also seems to symbolize ominousness and curse. His breath is old and decayed, just like Kaguya once was. But fortunately, time seems to have stopped for him. Kaguya didn't say much, she just rushed over and hugged Yi. Bury your head in his neck. Chapter 58. Yi felt very tired and lay directly on Kaguya. The feeling of the sacred tree corroding consciousness is not easy, the invasion of consciousness is constant, and he can only turn back time to the last second. Time imprisons Yi's thinking, so it is actually flowing backwards, like a continuous collapse and recovery. He kind of understood how Kaguya-sama had felt before. This feeling of confused thinking and consciousness gradually becoming silent is not pleasant. It was late at night, Yi lay on Kaguya-hime and slowly fell asleep. Even in his sleep, the pupil technique was still being activated endlessly. Although the crisis of the sacred tree was resolved, Yi felt more and more uneasy. After swallowing the chakra fruit, get the nearly infinite chakra and Sharingan, there was no way to calm his inner feelings. He often had a feeling that a disaster was about to happen. But after using the divine power to deduce, he still found nothing. At his level, he would naturally not ignore his strong intuition. This situation only happened in that year. If you are not strong enough to save Princess Kaguya, the result of the calculation will be nothing. And what on earth could it be, that made him unable to even figure out the result now? A sense of urgency always surrounded him. He began to speed up the completion of world tasks. Hope to get chakra fruit as soon as possible, feed it to Princess Kaguya. I hope she can protect herself no matter how chaotic the world is. Since the establishment of the Great Xia Imperial Court, the world has been unified. By now, the crisis of the sacred tree has been resolved, and the second world mission has been completed. Now, there is only one last task left, to advance the world by 2 technological ages. The moment firearms were invented, it was considered a technological advancement. Yi had already mastered the basic physics theories of his previous life. And all the remembered applied technology design drawings were handed over to the laboratory of the Daxia Imperial Court. All we can do next, is wait. In recent years, the Great Xia Imperial Court has developed rapidly. Under a series of decrees issued by Yi, the country is peaceful and the people are safe, and there are few criminals. The people's happiness index has soared. A true era of prosperity and peace has arrived. Yi has complicated thoughts about the Great Xia Imperial Court. Yi didn't want to build any country. The consequences would be too serious and it was too troublesome. But the system issued another task. Kaguya's power was divided, and he really needed the chakra fruit. But now, Yi discovered that the unification of the world has far-reaching consequences and is far from as simple as it seems. It will itself condense a huge national destiny and can influence the rise and fall of the world. At the same time, it can suppress the will of the sacred tree to a certain extent. At this moment, Yi could clearly feel that in addition to the backflow of pupil skills, it is constantly repairing the corrosion of the sacred tree on its own will. Then there is the national destiny, which actually reduces the influence of the will of the sacred tree. However, this is a mixed blessing, although it weakens the erosion of the sacred tree. But if his fate was really tied to the Great Xia Imperial Court, that was not what he wanted. He hated being tied down. On the day when Yi ascended the throne, the silver dragon appeared. Once he flew straight into the clouds of the sky, swallowing clouds and spewing out mist, accompanied by thunder and lightning. He swallowed and exhaled the dragon luck of the Great Xia Imperial Court, and his body became even larger. At the same time, it is equivalent to congratulating it and suppressing the fortune of the Great Xia Imperial Court. The two complement each other. On that day, the laws of nature in this world even felt something faintly. The clouds in the sky change into 7 colors, forming various brilliant patterns. Auspiciousness covers thousands of miles. Speaking of the silver dragon, since it came out of the snow world, then absorbed the dragon veins and natural energy, he also followed the army of the Great Xia Imperial Court and grew by absorbing military spirit. At this time, it was in the back mountain of the Great Xia Imperial Court, becoming a being similar to a guardian beast of the country. If Yin Jiao wants to grow, he needs a bigger stage. A greater fortune, not only the fate of the country, but also the fate of heaven and earth. The increasingly uneasy mood prompted Yu Yi to have an idea. 3 years later, Yu Yi began to integrate the power of this world. According to legend, there is a suspected evil cult in the northern territory of the Great Xia Imperial Court. In this era of peace and prosperity, when imperial power reigns, it is unbelievable that such a place can provide fertile soil for the growth of cults. This shows that it is indeed a strange method that has its merits. As expected, the Great Xia Imperial Court had sent soldiers to encircle and suppress the enemy many times. But several followers of the evil cult are almost immortal. The bullet passed through his chest, but he was still alive and kicking. Fortunately, their combat power is not high. Just an ordinary person with a special physique. So it didn't cause too much panic. Finally, they succeeded in destroying the gathering den and captured several followers of the evil god. Originally, this kind of thing would not alarm Yu Yi. But he had given special instructions. If you discover any supernatural power, report it to him. At this time, in the magnificent hall, Yu Yuruaki was dressed in white, with an indifferent look, sitting high above the main seat. Today he was attending the class for the first time, and he came in person. He doesn't like wearing yellow clothes, and until now, he still wears the white clothes that Princess Kaguya made for him. Of course, this dress was even enlightened by him and gave birth to spiritual intelligence. It can automatically shield you from wind and dust, wash away all the dirtiness, and grow with you as you grow. The civil and military officials knelt respectfully below the stage. I never dared to look up at Yu Yuruaki's eyes. These were Yu Yi's former subordinates, most of whom were the backbone of the Tianyu Xingyi Second Pavilion. Promoted by Yu Yi through the taking wonky technique, each of them has an extraordinary destiny, good luck, and real talent. Under the absolute power, everything is as clear as a glimpse in the palm of your hand. Naturally, there is no such thing as corrupt officials or palace fighting. At this time, as Yu Yi's aura became stronger and stronger, after merging with the sacred tree and opening the reincarnation Sharingan, the ethereal temperament reached its peak. At this point, no one dares to look him in the eye, as if they were seeing the face of God. Yu Yi listened to the reports of his subordinates calmly. When talking about the evil god cult, Yu Yi looked sideways. At this moment, he thought of an organization that had a profound influence in later generations, Xiao. In the Akatsuki organization, there seems to be a person named Haiden who also possesses the ability of immortality. And they are followers of some evil god. The next moment, in the back mountain of the Great Xia Imperial Court. The evil god. Yu Yi murmured, he already knew the message from the clone. Father, I can already use Susanoo. Yu Yi said excitedly. A powerful stream of chakra had already surged out of his body, now covering his upper body, it takes the form of a skeleton. Is this your Susanoo? Just the bones. Yu Yi glanced at him indifferently. Ah, this. Yu Yi finally guided them to practice. Yu Yi originally thought she would be praised, but her face darkened. Father, I can condense the truth-seeking ball. Hamura, who was standing nearby, said, in his hand, a truth-seeking ball was slowly floating and spinning in the air. Looking at Yu Yi with expectation. Yeah, not bad. Yu Yi nodded and praised softly. Hamura's little face immediately turned red and a smile appeared. I also. Yu Yi was not convinced and was about to say that he could do it too. Yu Yi frowned. I will also, practice hard. Yu Yi held back his words and changed his tone. Looking into Yu Yi's Rinnegan, I really didn't have the courage to continue. Practice well, I'll come back to check later. Though Yamaki, the next moment, ripples appeared in the space. He has disappeared. I feel like my father is so partial. It was the same with wood style before. I was the first one to learn it, but he didn't praise me. Yu Yi shouted in annoyance. I think I know the reason. Hamura spoke weakly from the side. What's the reason? Yu Yi asked hurriedly. Maybe you're not as cute as me. When Hamura explained the reason, a hint of reserve flashed across his face. Looking at Hamura's silver hair that is similar to Kaguya Hime's, Yu Yi became even more depressed. Chapter 59. In the northern border of the Great Xia Imperial Court, Yu Yi took a step out from the air. He looked indifferent, and his white clothes were whiter than snow. Looking at this area, there are few people here. There are no towns gathered together, the terrain is complex, with mountains behind it and some scattered villages settled here. So even though the Imperial Court's soldiers surrounded this place many times, there will still be some evil cultists who slip through the net. Coming here, Yi could clearly feel a strange energy filling the world. And it exudes a familiar smell. The core of that energy source seems to be in a mountain villa. Yi did not hesitate, and the next moment he operated the space shuttle. Come to the place of strange energy, but I found that the place was already a river of blood and corpses were everywhere. Almost every household in the village has been drained of blood and flesh. Reduced to dry bones, the only one still alive, there was only one little girl, who was standing in the middle. There were piles of dry bones and corpses on the ground beneath him. There are black and white stripes spreading all over the body, which looks strange and abnormal. And the Akatsuki member named Haiden in later generations, it is the same when launching the evil god ritual. And noticing Yi's arrival, the little girl looked over slowly. There was no intelligence in her eyes, but instead there was an instinctive fear and turbidity. Perhaps out of fear, she bared her fangs and claws at Yi like a wild beast. Instantly, the small mouth split open and expanded to the ear. Like the woman with a slit mouth, she was extremely hideous and terrifying. Yi frowned, and the next moment a truth-seeking ball condensed in his hand. Falling towards the little girl. Boom! The terrifying energy of the truth-seeking ball exploded at this moment, annihilating all life. Under the huge destructive force, it seemed that everything was wiped out. The little girl's mind had long been lost. At this moment, he was possessed by a strange thing. That's why Yi attacked without hesitation. The smoke from the truth-seeking ball dissipated, but strangely, the little girl's broken flesh and blood gathered together bit by bit. After a while, it changed into human form again. Still looking at him with fear and demonstration. Interesting. Yi whispered. The next moment, he used the ashes of the common killing to condense a bone sword in his hand. Coming to the little girl, at this moment, the little girl clearly felt fear. The whole body was trembling. The constant collapse and destruction of the bones can actually kill her. As Yi continued to approach, the little girl bit Yi in panic. However, the next moment, a repulsive force pushed her away. She wanted to turn around and run away, but her body seemed to be frozen at this moment. Yi came in front of her, floating in the air. Looking down at her. Her eyes were filled with a strong desire to survive and fear. Yi raised the bone sword in his hand, with only endless indifference in his eyes. No, don't. It was the clear cry of a little girl. Could it be that consciousness has not been completely erased? Yi frowned. But it did not hinder Yi's determination to kill this thing. A group of twisted things that only know how to kill and be bloodthirsty will only bring harm if they are left behind. But the next moment, tears strangely flowed from the little girl's eyes. Yi finally stopped. The next moment, the Sharingan started to work. The brilliant divine light revealed countless past and future stories of the little girl. And all kinds of causes and effects appear in his eyes. After obtaining the Sharingan, he integrated the ability of divine calculation into his eyes. At this moment, one can see through a person's past and future with just one glance. And the countless causes and effects related to it. He saw this picture, the little girl's birth date is unknown, and it seems that her parents died at birth. Growing up under the bullying and scorn of the villagers, not long ago, the followers of the evil cult came to this village. He persuaded the villagers to join the religion, and a small number of them agreed. Most of those who disagreed were imprisoned and prepared to be sacrificed to the evil god. But this little girl who was bullied finally ran to save the villagers. However, he was discovered by the evil cult while escaping. What makes people sigh is that the rescued villagers abandoned the little girl while fleeing. Let her attract the attention of the evil cult. Finally the little girl was captured and sacrificed to the evil god. It fits the little girl surprisingly well. In the end, he merged with the little girl and in turn killed the believers. At this time, the little girl's consciousness was blurred and chaotic, but she still had the instinct to survive. The so-called evil god has a mysterious origin and a long history. Even Yi couldn't figure it out. It itself is almost immortal. Currently, the only way to kill it is to kill Huigu together or seal it. Even if they kill each other, the evil god will gradually adapt to the continuous collapse. After 1,000 years, it will be resurrected again, and the problem cannot be solved fundamentally. But fortunately, the evil god seemed to be confused and chaotic, with only the instinct of bloodthirsty killing left. But now, he merged with the little girl again, but with a little more humanity. And in the original trajectory, it seems that it has always been influenced by the little girl. It will remain silent in the mountains and forests, and after 1,000 years, Haydn will be the only believer. So, after figuring out the reason, Yi had a complicated expression, but he couldn't do it anymore. Not to mention that even if we kill them together, we cannot completely destroy them. They will revive again after 1,000 years. Without the influence of the little girl, things would seem to be even more troublesome. Moreover, he seemed to see his own shadow in the little girl. Yi prevented the growth of the sacred tree, and the little girl prevented the evil god from influencing the world. This world is really full of disasters. In the end, Yi collected Gongshamigu. He imprisoned the little girl's body. On her black and white striped face, it is still easy to see her former beauty. 2 lines of tears slowly slid down her cheeks. She looked cautious and apprehensive. But it's more turbid, bloodthirsty, and distorted. Yi sighed softly and slowly stretched out a hand. Lightly tap on her forehead. Suddenly, like ripples caused by falling water drops, circles of ripples spread from her body. At this moment, her eyes seemed to have more spirit and humanity. At the same time, a special connection is formed with Yu Yat. She no longer looked panicked, and there was more intimacy and curiosity in her eyes as she looked at Yi. Yi used the enlightenment technique to enlighten her. For anyone with low intelligence, Yi can enlighten any creature with chaotic consciousness and whose strength is lower than his own. From now on, you just follow me. Good. Leaving this unknown and incomprehensible existence here is potentially dangerous after all. Moreover, the evil god's abilities themselves are worth studying. Yi's inner uneasiness became stronger and stronger, and he could also vaguely feel that it seems to be from the Otsutsuki clan. If we look at the scene presented in the first level of Yin Yang Tomb, it cannot be overemphasized that a race that has achieved interstellar migration and colonization of the starry sky deserves too much attention. At this point, he will not let go of any power that appears on this planet. Whether it is used to suppress the luck and make the dragon grow faster, he has to do this, whether it is to ensure that there will be more people capable of fighting in the future. The evil little girl nodded in confusion. The next moment, her body began to fade, and finally turned into a black shadow. Merged into Yi's shadow. Chapter 60. These 2 chapters may be a little bit changed, but it will not affect the subsequent Hokage plot. 2 years later, Yi found a lineage of witches in another area. That is a lineage that is even older than Onmyoji. In the Death of Naruto movie, a shrine maiden named Shin was mentioned. Possesses the ability to predict the future. As one of the few women who likes Naruto, Yi is deeply impressed by him. This lineage of witches seemed to symbolize disaster and bad luck. Whoever you dream about will die. Through the Sharingan of Rinnegan, Yi discovered that most of these witches have tragic fates. They master the ancient sealing technique. And some strange magic. If Onmyoji is good at using natural energy and the assistance of Shikigami, then the witch is more adept at using spiritual energy. Moreover, each of them has an extraordinary destiny and strong mental strength, and seems to be favored by the will of the world. Yi eventually brought them to the imperial court. Let them join the Technology Research and Development Department to achieve technological transformation as soon as possible. What kind of sparks will be created when the witch era and the foundations of modern physics complement each other? Yi is looking forward to this. As for the sealed monster, Yi raised his hand and killed him. But I don't know which era this product was left behind. In the theatrical version, it was said that it could destroy the world. However, he was destroyed by Naruto, who was still a genin, using the big ball raise Nan. This shows how much water there is in ginseng. Yi is naturally not interested in this. With the addition of a group of witches, they are obsessed with those wonderful physics theories all day long and focus on scientific research. The progress of the world has indeed accelerated a lot. 5 years later, the world has finally ushered in a technological transformation. The entire Great Xia Imperial Court was brightly lit. The streets and alleys are scattered and orderly. In addition to population issues, there are no skyscrapers with 2 high floors, they still look like ancient palace buildings. Every household has a bungalow similar to the Beijing courtyard houses. The whole world has changed. The modern and ancient atmospheres are intertwined everywhere. The world is changing with each passing day, but it still has the same ideological and cultural core as in ancient times. For example, the hierarchy is still in order, the class hierarchy is strict, and the imperial power is supreme. Apart from that, they have a life close to modern life. But even the huge changes in the environment did not lead to the birth of something like the Enlightenment and Cultural Renaissance. Because under the art of Qigong, there are no corrupt officials, the world is peaceful, and the people are safe and sound. Some of the great thinkers with extraordinary potential were recruited into the imperial court by Yu Yi and became his subordinates. Moreover, in this world where extraordinary beings exist, the extraordinary is enough to suppress everything. There is no need for excessive ideological education. Ordinary people all know spontaneously that all these changes, they all come from the imperial court, the gift of the supreme being. They cherish it all. The only troublesome thing is, I guess it's that day after day, to that supreme being, almost fanatical worship and belief. This is similar to the unification of imperial power and divine authority. 2 years later, a floating city in the sky rises slowly from the ground. This was the inspiration that the witches got after seeing the repulsive force. It forms a gravitational drive similar to magnetic levitation. The core of the energy is the power of Yu Yi's Sharingan. It is the culmination of technology in this era. And below the dynasty, there is a space teleportation array leading to the city in the sky. But since he is not Yu Yi's trusted subordinate, he is not qualified to come up. From then on, it was like cutting off the connection between heaven and earth. Yu Yi brought Kaguya and Yu Yi Hamura to live here. Sit and watch the ups and downs of the world, and look down at everything in this world. And at this moment, Yu Yi finally received the reward for the world mission. Task 1, sweep across the 6 directions and 8 wastelands, do not participate in the war, and become the master of heaven and earth. Mission completed. Task 2, develop the technology tree and upgrade the world by 2 technological revolutions. Mission completed. Task 3, resolve the crisis of the sacred tree. Mission accomplished. World quest completed. Reward, chakra fruit. Instantly, from the void, a ball of supreme and profound energy emerged. It gathered in Yu Yi's hands and condensed into the chakra fruit. Yu Yi's eyebrows slightly frowned. This was the first time that the system had materialized something. He just opened the Sharingan to peek, and even opened Sage Mode to expand his perception. But still no one knows where this energy comes from. The origin of the system is mysterious, it cannot be a product of this world. Even with his strength standing at the top of the world, he couldn't sense anything. He had examined himself many times, including the depths of his soul. Couldn't find anything unusual. Shaking his head, Yu Yi stopped thinking about it. These things will naturally surface as his strength increases. At this time, Yu Yi had a purple chakra fruit in his hand. There are many types of chakra fruits. It depends on the energy level of a planet. The energy level in the Hokage world is already very high, so the chakra fruit that is condensed, only then can there be such a level of existence as the Sharingan of the Samsara sect. This is not found in other Otsutsuki clans. Other Otsutsuki may also have the power of reincarnation. But Megatama and Sharon are unique to this planet. At this moment, the one in Yu Yi's hand, compared with the previous world condensation, the amount of chakra that came with the one eaten is slightly lower, but the energy level is not low. The previous one was pitch black, but this one was purple. Yu Yi gave the chakra fruit to Kaguya. After she finished eating, a strange energy began to sweep through her body. The Otsutsuki features on her body began to fade visibly. The horns on his head began to disappear, and even his eyebrows began to grow back. The skin becomes whiter, more delicate and crystal clear at this moment. Except for her silver hair still fluttering in the wind, it makes her look even more charming, like a banished immortal under the moonlight. Her appearance is more exquisite and perfect, it's as if it was born entirely to cater to the aesthetics of this world. At this moment, no matter who it is, no matter how critical their eyes are, can't find any fault with it. Her eyes were no longer absolutely white. Instead, mysterious circles of purple lines began to appear in the white. This is her pupil technique. It seems that there is an indescribable charm in nature. In addition to the almost endless chakra, it also has a similar ability to control the mind and soul. Of course, the original Byakugan ability is still maintained. At this time, Princess Kaguya has an indescribable charm, and her temperament is slightly revealed, which makes her peerless and graceful. Even Yu Yi's eyes looked a little dazed. "Yeah, what are you looking at me for?" Seeing Yuaki staring at her, Kaguya felt a little embarrassed. A blush appeared on her delicate face. Yu Yi didn't say anything, but held her face. He placed a kiss on her smooth forehead. At the same time, he smoothed her silver hair. "Has anything changed?" Yu Yi asked. "I seem to be able to see into a person's soul." Kaguya murmured. Yu Yi understood and didn't say anything else. Instead, he picked up Kaguya and brought her into the room. Chapter 61. Yu Yi has been feeling more and more uneasy lately. He began to speed up the training of Hago Romo Hamura. I hope they can reach the level of the original novel as soon as possible and enter the 6 paths level. At this time, Yu Yi Hamura was already 13 years old. Under Yu Yi's instruction, they have become proficient in using yin-yang escape and condensing truth-seeking ball. Turn on 6 paths mode, and the complete Susanoo. At the same time, Yu Yi taught them Sage mode and Space Ninjutsu. Their strength is increasing rapidly. The power belonging to the sacred tree and Otsutsuki was tapped. But even so, Yu Yi felt it was not enough. At the same time, the silver dragon also came back. He had been in a dragon vein in the ancient kingdom of Lulan that appeared in the movie. The original novel once introduced that the powerful force of dragon veins can even travel through time and space. Naruto with his father, 4th Hokage Namikaze Minato, we met in a special space. But after Yu Yi's investigation, he found that the so-called time travel it's just that the powerful force of the dragon vein formed a special gravitational field. The space and power of different time and space can be presented in a special space through projection for short-term interaction. Similar to Mirage and Kaika Suijutsu, there is no real time travel. But even so, it is enough to illustrate the uniqueness and power of the dragon vein. Before this, the silver dragon had nourished itself in the dragon vein. Now it finally appears again. Its body is larger than before, and the dragon's pressure on it is getting stronger. It found Yu Yi, live with Yu Yuruaki and his family in the floating city in the sky. In the past few years, the Great Xia dynasty has become more and more prosperous. The unification of the world and the unprecedented peace have brought about rapid development in the world. Every household has access to electricity. Steam engines, electric motors, etc. have long been developed in laboratories. It just hasn't been put into civilian use. At this time, televisions, telephones, stereos, mobile phones and other electronic products also appeared one after another. Vehicles similar to vehicles began to appear on the streets. Even if information begins to be gradually exchanged and opened, people are even more enthusiastic about the Supreme Being. Their material needs have been met and they are beginning to shift to spiritual needs. And the hazy corner of the world floating in the clouds that was rumored to be revealed inadvertently, it is the most beautiful and shocking scenery in the world. It is high above, standing on the horizon, overlooking everything on this earth. From time to time, there are devastating energy fluctuations emanating from it. There are also figures spreading across thousands of miles, puffing out clouds and mist. Rumor has it that it is the residence of the ruler of the Great Xia Imperial Court. It is the beginning of all civilization and the origin of science and technology. It is the Supreme Being who created everything. People regard the sky castle floating above the world as a holy place. Every Hyga Sky City pilgrimage is a must for them. Being able to enter the city in the sky is their lifelong goal. When the living extraordinary is revealed to the world. As time went by, the rumors became more and more mythical, and people did not hesitate to praise it. They began to call the world with endless divine light on the horizon heaven. During this period, when Yu Yi Yukin was training several times, his amazing power was discovered by the world. Therefore, Hamura was given a title, Sage of 6 Paths. And Princess Kaguya is still the goddess of Mao. As for Yu Yi, he is the ruler of heaven and even everything in the world, the emperor of heaven. As for the silver dragon that was breathing out clouds and mist, it was called the dragon god. Regarding the names people gave him, Yu Yi could only shake his head and laugh. Although they have reached the pinnacle of this world, but it was still far from creating the heavenly palace, and the consequences of the actions taken during this period were too serious. But since the name has already spread, it is difficult for Yu Yi to correct it, so just let them be. Over the past few years, Yu Yi has been developing the power of the Sharingan. Through continuous and proficient use, Yu Yi discovered that Sharingan is far more than what is shown in the original work. He is the origin of the Rinnegan and Sharingan, and contains the power of creation and destruction. But in fact, it also includes all the Mangekyou techniques that appeared in later generations. As long as he is under the influence of a certain spiritual power, he can use all the pupil techniques that appear in the original work. In later generations, it is only because of the thinness of blood that Mangekyou needs to be activated through spiritual stimulation. Thus inheriting a single ability, as for the Sharingan, which is the source of the Rinnegan, these are actually just basic abilities. After mastering the Sharingan, Yu Yi's strength at this time has already surpassed Princess Kaguya in the original work. But the recent uneasiness has always been with him. Yu Yi Yukin walked on the street of Daxia Imperial Court, looking at the surging crowd, and couldn't help but look complicated. Due to Yuyi's increasingly rigorous training in recent days, they rarely come out to relax today. At this time, although they were only 13 years old, but her figure has grown to be very tall. If it weren't for her childish face, from a distance, he looked like an adult. It must be said that the bodies of the Otsutsuki clan developed quickly. The Great Xia Imperial Court has experienced more than 10 years of development. The economy has developed to the ultimate level. There is a lot of traffic, and it is well connected. There are crowds of people everywhere, a peaceful atmosphere, and a sense of prosperity. The atmosphere of worldly affairs is very heavy. But they had no way to appreciate this beauty at this time. Only when you go to the country created by Yuuki can you feel the influence of Yuyi in this world. Songs paying tribute to and praising the Emperor of Heaven and the Heavenly Palace were played everywhere in the streets and alleys. And the murals of the Emperor of Heaven that are placed on every tall building and hung in every household, the figure in the mural is peerless and has an unparalleled appearance. But the face was blurry and could not be seen clearly. They had complicated thoughts at this moment, and all they felt was the heavy pressure like a mountain and Yuyi's insurmountable figure. Soon, their unusual appearance and extraordinary temperament, it also attracted people's attention. Your Highness! Your Highnesses! The crowd looked at them respectfully. Attention to detail. As the only one in the entire heaven who often comes down, people are still very familiar with Hago Romo Hamura. They both raised their heads slightly and nodded. The depressed mood was relieved. It seems that they are still very popular in the Great Xia Imperial Court. Your Highness, brother. I saw a little girl trotting over, her face flushed, holding a bunch of flowers. He looked at Yuyi with longing and shyness. This is for you. Otsutsuki Hagoromo's mouth corners slightly raised, his joy became stronger. The depressed mood caused by being beaten up during cultivation was swept away. I instantly felt refreshed, the world seemed beautiful, and even my back straightened up a lot. Then he did not forget to look at Hamura proudly. Look, I have a little crush on you too. Ahem. Otsutsuki Hago Romo coughed and was about to pretend to take the flowers. Please be sure to pass it on to Lord Emperor Tian for me. Please. The little girl bowed 90 degrees. Then he ran away with a shy look on his face. Only the feathered clothes were left disheveled in the wind. Although they often run down there, their status in people's minds is far lower than that of the legendary Emperor of Heaven. Poof! Hamura couldn't help but burst out laughing. This was not the end, and then another group of children ran towards them. Holding various gifts in his hands, he spoke loudly. Brother Second Prince, this is a cake I made myself. Please be sure to pass it to the Emperor of Heaven on my behalf. Brother, this is the scarf I knitted myself. Please be sure to pass it to the Emperor of Heaven for me. Your Highness, brother, can you help me get an autograph from the Emperor? Soon, Otsutsuki Hago Romo and Hamura were filled with gifts. You're here. At this moment, a clear and melodious voice came from the air. It was Otsutsuki Hania. He was seen floating in the sky in a fluttering white robe. Her posture is ethereal, and her delicate and flawless face has a hint of playfulness, as if she is smiling but not smiling. His whole body has an amazing temperament, like a banished immortal. A pair of Sharingan slowly rotated in his eyes, and 9 black megatama blossomed with amazing brilliance. The strange thing is that his appearance did not cause any uproar. Yuyi and Hamura looked around strangely. But I found out that this space and time was forbidden. This was naturally because Yuyi used the pupil technique of the Sharingan to confine this space. If he appeared directly at this time, it would definitely cause an uproar. Long in the past, he had experienced the enthusiasm of fans through personal experience. It seems that you are quite popular. Yuyi raised the corners of his delicate mouth slightly, and said with some amusement. Hago Romo Hamura was very depressed and was just about to say something. Come with me, then Yuyi waved his hand, and the two of them were drawn by a force of gravity. Floating high in the sky, it came in front of Yuyi. Then Yuyi's Sharingan, the mysterious 9 black megatama kept spinning, a powerful chakra with amazing pupil power bloomed from the Sharingan. The space surged, and even the light seemed to be distorted. After a while, a tunnel door that traveled through time and space appeared in front of them. The recent uneasiness made Yuyi decide to take Uro Hamura to see the toad on Mount Maiboku. Chapter 62. Kaguya sat on the clouds at the edge of the sky, holding her chin and waiting for Yuyi and the others to come back. The clouds in the stratosphere are pure white, and the large clouds are filled with an erratic haziness. Since there are various magics operating around the heavenly palace, there are naturally no dark clouds or thunderstorms. All year round, the breeze is always warm and peaceful. At this moment, he gently lifted Kaguya's silver hair, like a dancing elf. The effect of the chakra fruit on her was more profound. Her appearance is flawless, and her temperament is even more extraordinary. At this moment, she seemed to be out of touch with the world. The unintentional display of grace is peerless. At this moment, she just sat there quietly, making people feel that the years were peaceful. It seems to have become the center of the world, forming the most beautiful landscape. Over the past few decades, Yi would spend most of his time with her. When all misunderstandings are resolved, there is no crisis. Most of the days will return to normal. Yi would guide Ui and Hamura in their training, and she would sit here and watch quietly. Usually I sit there for a whole day. She and Yi have similar personalities, and it's unclear who follows whom. The personality gradually becomes dull and less talkative. Most of them involve facial expressions and physical contact, or are more like a fusion of mind and spirit. Sometimes, the other party frowned. You know what the other person is thinking. Over time, they have formed an unspoken understanding. At this moment, in her eyes, brilliant and mysterious purple lines appeared. She looked in a distant direction, smiling gently. After swallowing the chakra fruit, the visual range of her eyes increased again. As long as she wanted, she could easily see any corner of the world. At this moment, she saw Ui Hamura and a toad. She looked at it like this for a long time. Thank you. Got it. She suddenly spoke softly, as if she was talking to the air, or as if she was talking to herself. There was a barely perceptible trace of loneliness in her eyes. But she hid it well. What are you looking at here? A figure suddenly appeared from behind her and covered her eyes. I'm looking at your clone and that little toad. Kaguya chuckled. As if she knew who was coming, Kaguya just let her eyes be covered. There was no intention of moving his hand away. Really? Which one do you see more? Yi asked. Sitting down in the cloud behind her, his legs naturally fit the outside of her long legs, wrapping her up. He buried his head in her neck and wrapped his arms around her body. Of course I'd rather watch yet or more. Princess Kaguya fell back slightly and lay in the arms of the person behind her. They didn't say anything else, but just watched the clouds roll by. Looking at the vast land thousands of miles away. Looking at the world. After a while, Kaguya suddenly said. Yetter, can we get married? Yi's body trembled. Even with his current state of mind, there were ripples as well. He began to recall every detail of his time with Kaguya over the past decade. Over the past 10 years, Yi has often brought Kaguya to the Daxia Imperial Court to experience life. The civil technology of the Great Xia Imperial Court has become quite advanced, and many new things have emerged. There are even many roadside stalls in the streets and alleys like those in the previous life. Kaguya's eyes light up when she sees something delicious, completely revealing her foodie nature. Then Yi could only follow along and shop. In my hands are all kinds of skewers, ice cream, lollipops, sweets, the list goes on. Well, Yetter, this is for you. Kaguya stuck out her tongue and licked the sausage in front of her. Then he frowned slightly and stuffed it into Yi's mouth. No matter what food it is, Kaguya will usually take a small bite first. If he felt it didn't taste good, he would stuff it into Yi's mouth. She likes to eat things that taste sweet and sticky when she licks them. Of course, sausages are not included. But when Yi chewed a few bites and ate with gusto, she would grab it again. What the hell is going on here? She answered vaguely. But sometimes, Kaguya would accidentally buy some durian dipped in wasabi. She just sniffed with her little nose and frowned. If it is determined that it is not tasty, it will be given to Yi. Then Yi would look very happy and praise loudly. You know what, even though it doesn't look delicious, I found out when I actually ate it. Then Kaguya would grab it doubtfully and take another bite. The more she ate, the more she felt something was wrong. When she finished eating, only then did I notice the smile on Yi's lips. I just realized it's really not tasty. Ah! Yetter, you've become a bad person. Kaguya screamed in anger, and a powerful repulsive force erupted at this moment. All kinds of messy things will be thrown at Yi. In the end, Yi had no choice but to turn back time. Put everything back to the way it was. But I just think it tastes good. When I realized that Princess Kaguya might be really angry, and the kind that might be difficult to appease. Yu will look at Kaguya with deep affection, then slowly approached her, on her delicate and flawless cheeks, at the rosy corners of her mouth, gently brush the cream that is still on it with your hands. Then put it into his mouth. Ah, you! Kaguya will be ashamed, your face will instantly turn red like an apple, and you will be at a loss. But most of the anger will disappear. It's so funny, there is no such thing as someone who can't be coaxed. But compared to buying all the way, Kaguya still prefers activities like lucky draws. Kaguya once loved a doll. But unfortunately it was not for sale and had to be drawn by lottery, so she liked it even more. People always seem to be interested in things that are not for sale and cannot be easily obtained. Even Kaguya is not immune to strange preferences and curiosities. Even if you can buy an identical one in the next store, she would still choose to draw a lottery. Then, Kaguya randomly drew a lottery ticket and won the special prize. Got the doll. Every time this happened, she would smile happily, as if she had earned something. And after they left, the subordinates lurking nearby would calmly give the boss several times the price of the doll. After all, it is not easy to change all the lottery scrolls into special prizes. They naturally don't attract people's attention when they go out to play. The Sharingan that Yuki opened was constantly using illusions to affect those who looked at them. People only think they see ordinary people. Even afterwards, you will forget this memory. Otherwise, given their temperament and appearance, even ordinary people might not know their identities. I would still be amazed by her beauty. If I were to be stared at all the way, there would be no need to go shopping. A girl with some abnormal mental power once accidentally glanced at the two of them in the crowd. I felt my heart tremble instantly. They have the temperament of fallen immortals and flawless appearance. No beautiful words in this world can describe it. The girl only glanced at him once and then turned her head away, not daring to look any further. When something is too good to be true, people often feel ashamed of themselves and cannot look at it directly. She had never seen such a beautiful couple in her life. They are so otherworldly, so perfect that they seem like a couple made in heaven. She even had the absurd feeling that this mundane world might pollute them. But then she thought that saying this might be a great act of treason to the Emperor of Heaven, so she quickly stopped her wild fantasies. She began to wander aimlessly along the street, but from time to time she pretended to look at the couple casually. Then he quickly lowered his head. When they walked away, the girl felt lost. She suddenly thought of something and picked up a pen to draw them, but she found that her memory of their appearance and other things began to blur rapidly. She held the pen blankly, for a moment she was at a loss, she couldn't draw. Kaguya also likes playing games. I remember the first time I taught Kaguya how to play games, it was the Super Game console that was all the rage in the previous life. I played the plumber in Super Mario. Kaguya clumsily manipulates the plumber, and when passing a mushroom monster, she didn't know how to hide, but just walked over blankly. Then he died unexpectedly. Kaguya will be so angry that she will throw the game controller away. How can this be? Mario can be good friends with the mushroom monster. How could he die? Yuki listened and thought it made sense. Modify the program immediately. Then Kaguya's Mario will be followed by a group of mushrooms and various small monsters. Together they ran to save the princess trapped by the dragon. When Yuji Hamura first saw this scene, he tried to hold back his laughter. And I also want to teach you by example that this game is not played this way. As a result, I started to doubt my life. And when playing fighting games with Kaguya, when Kaguya's obviously modified character attributes were abused in various ways, as expected, the two of them cried. At this time, Kaguya will look disdainful, you guys are too weak. You don't lose any blood when you hit me. Chapter 63. In recent years, Kaguya has even learned to cook. When she first started cooking, she would complain that the food was taking too long to cook. I use fire style to add more fire, and sometimes I don't control the chakra amount well. At that time, a fiery cloud appeared in the sky that stretched for thousands of miles. It became the most beautiful scenery in the imperial court of Daxia. If Yuyi hadn't left a ceiling barrier, the entire heavenly palace would have been burnt down. Yuyi rushed into the kitchen and carried Kaguya out. Her little face was already blackened by smoke. She put her arms around Yuyi's neck and buried her face in his arms. Like a good kid who has done something wrong, he seemed a little embarrassed. Yuyi had no choice but to use time reversal to restore everything to its original state. Then I had to teach her little by little in the kitchen. Who told Yi to once upgrade his cooking attribute to the maximum level? When Kaguya gets angry, she will take Yi to any place. They will walk hand in hand through the clouds, flying over the endless mountains and swamps, and the vast plains. I will skate in the ice and snow. Use ice to create various snowmen. I will dance on rainy days as if no one is around. It will also break through the earth's surface and stare at the vast starry sky in a daze. Every time this happened, Kaguya's body would tremble slightly. All Yi could do was hold her. Of course, she didn't look like this because she was homesick. It's because of fear. Let's get married. Kaguya-sama's words still echo in my ears. The past 10 years or so flashed through my mind like a movie. It turns out that without realizing it, they have already experienced so much. Lovers finally get married. Along the way, you have experienced many ups and downs. You had ill intentions from the beginning, but after unremitting efforts, you finally made Kaguya realize your feelings. Facing Otsutsuki Kaguya's proposal, what is your choice at this time? Option 1, nod in agreement and give her a grand and dazzling wedding. Reward, 10 seigen. Option 2, decline politely, I am underage. We are not suitable. Reward, roll your eyes. Option 3, refuse cruelly and tell her the truth. I actually like men. Reward, Rinnegan automatically ignore the emergence of the system. Yi whispered, good. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Mount my boku, space ripples, a portal that distorts time and space appears. Yi's clone took a step out with Yi Hamura. The slightly humid environment comes into view at this moment. This is a cave, with murals all around. The people in the mural are dressed in white. Her temperament is ethereal like a fairy, and her demeanor is outstanding. The appearance is blurry and unclear. He was holding a pitch-black sword that was who knows how many miles long. A great boundary was opened with one blow. The breath of creation and destruction permeated his body at the same time. He looked indifferent, as if he was the ruler of the world, reenacting the chaos of the universe. Seeing the figure on the mural, Yi Hamura's eyes were filled with complex emotions. Their father will probably be a hurdle that they will never be able to overcome in their lifetime. A small brown frog with a string of Buddhist beads hanging around its neck, on which was a Chinese character. Sitting in a rocking chair, he was humming a little tune. That was a little song praising the Emperor of Heaven and the Heavenly Palace. Every time I come to the Great Xia Imperial Court, I hear, and before long, even a little toad learned it. Cultural exports have actually crossed races and been brought here? For a moment, Yi Hamura felt a little disheveled. And seemed to sense the movement. Toad Pill opened his eyes, his gaze shrank at first, and then he closed them again in disbelief. I saw it rubbed it hard in a humane way. When I opened my eyes again, they were already blurry. A great fear and joy enveloped it. Heaven, Lord Emperor of Heaven. Toad Pill opened his mouth, his voice trembling, he couldn't control his emotions. 10 years ago, when I met Toad Pill in the snow world, its intelligence has undoubtedly improved a lot at this time, and it can already speak human language. It jumped down from the chair and prostrated itself on the ground respectfully. The body was trembling a little. The scene in the snow world is forever engraved in its mind. Making a pilgrimage to the heaven floating in the sky every day is also an essential task for it. Have you dreamt about anything lately? Yi glanced at it indifferently and asked. This little toad in front of us was once called Toad Sage in the original novel. Every time it dreams, its predictions will come true and will cause changes in the world. In the TV version, his first dream directly predicted the war between Hago Romo Hamura and Otsutsuki Kaguya. It can be said that Kaguya-hime was sealed, and it played a considerable role in fueling the flames. The second prophecy directly caused Indra and Ashura to fight. Next came Madara and Hashirama, Jiraiya, and then the protagonist Uzumaki Naruto. Basically, he appears in every major plot line. At this time, Yi used the Sharingan to see its past and future. As expected, it was discovered that it was just like Abe Haruaki in the past. The will of the world and the destiny of heaven and earth began to shift to it. Yi's divine calculations were limited by his own strength, and he himself was enveloped in the calamity cloud, obscured by the divine power, making it difficult for him to deduce anything. However, Gamamaru is favored by the world's will and stands out from the crowd. It will receive warnings from the world, but is more likely to dream about something than he is. Ah? Dreaming? No. I often dream about the heroic figure of the Emperor of Heaven. Toad Pill kept scratching his head, thinking hard. I was afraid that I might do something to displease the Emperor of Heaven. Is it possible that he hasn't awakened yet? Yu Yi frowned. Perhaps it was because the world's will had just shifted toward it not long ago, so there was no time to issue a warning. You actually mastered Sage Mode? Yu Yesui asked again. The aura of the toad ball in front of him was gradually becoming more ethereal, but it had already begun to blend with nature. Ah, that scene in the Snowwind realm. I have always kept the Heavenly Emperor's posture in my mind, imitating it day and night. Toad Pill scratched his head a little embarrassedly. Could it be that due to the good fortune, they actually learned Sage Mode from me? And it seems that the little white snake and Katsuya probably both gained something. However, his Sage Mode is derived from the original work. Today, I have repaid them. If you have any strange dreams recently, please let me know. After thinking about it, Yu Yi said. Hey! Now that Lord Tiandi mentioned this, I remember it. At this time, Toad Pill exclaimed again and said something. Remember what? Yu Yi asked, raising an eyebrow. I seem to have had a dream yesterday. As usual, there was nothing much to say about the heroic figure of the Emperor of Heaven. But it seemed that there was also a round glowing thing like the sun, blocking out the sky, and then there was a guy with silver hair. Toadmaru kept scratching his head, trying hard to organize his words. Round, something like the Sunday. Is it the moon? It was actually created by the planetary devastation, with silver hair. Yu Yi's expression was complicated and his voice was a little hoarse. Kaguya Hime, will she still be sealed? Chapter 64. The Emperor of Heaven is getting married. That day, a beam of light that penetrated the sky and the earth fell from the sky. The golden light illuminates the 9 heavens and 10 earths, shaking the universe. That was a decree passed down by the Emperor of Heaven. From then on, the whole world, heaven and earth, was shocked. The entire Great Xia imperial court began to decorate with lights and colors, and the whole world celebrated. Every household in the Daxia imperial court pasted up red couplets and started making red lanterns, with gongs and drums beating loudly. From a distance, the entire country was painted bright red at this moment. The sky is full of auspiciousness, with dragons and phoenixes appearing in a variety of colors. Some strange beasts that had never appeared before were conjured up at this moment. They include the 4 heavenly spirits, the azure dragon, the vermilion bird, the white tiger, and the black tortoise, as well as the auspicious beast the Kailan. These were all created by Yu Yi using yin-yang escape, and at this moment they seemed to be living creatures. They are Kamui, vast and filling the heavens. At this moment, heaven seemed to have become the real heaven. All the citizens of the Great Xia imperial court were greatly shocked, and they could not calm down for a long time. They looked up at the heavens with piety and reverence. There seemed to be something flickering in his eyes. It was the gaze of a pilgrim. Meanwhile, when the clone and Hago Romo Hamura returned from Mount Maiboku, Yu Yi just pondered for a moment. A bright and vast moon began to rise slowly from the sky. Yu Yi cultivates his own luck and karma, but he never believes in any fictitious fate. I don't believe in the revisionism of history. If there was, he would completely break it down and change everything beyond recognition. So he acted recklessly all the time. So what if a completely different technological world develops? He has become the supreme being of this world, the source of everything. A simple thought or decision can have an immeasurable impact on future generations. Even if the subsequent Hokage world cannot be formed, what does it have to do with him? Don't listen to him. It won't affect the subsequent Hokage plot, even if it will lack some excitement. He has experienced so much in this world. With Kagaiji now in the picture, he no longer knew how much affection he once had from the Hokage. The only thing he cared about at this moment was to change Kaguya Hime's fate. To do this, he did not hesitate to tamper with the entire world. He would not hesitate even if it meant that the work would take a completely different development path from the original. And compared to the later Hokage, that cold ninja world, naturally, he felt more attached to his country in his previous life. That's why the Great Xia Imperial Court is the Great Xia Imperial Court, and not some Konoha shinobi village. So the whole world, he always shapes and approaches his country, his home, and the cultural core that he is familiar with in his previous life, so as not to feel unfamiliar. Fortunately, he is powerful enough to change and influence all of this. At this time, Toad Pill's prophecy seems to have a creepy historical revisionism. The world is sounding the alarm. Then, he would take action again and break it himself. Moreover, even though this world has become very similar to the previous life under his influence, but without the moon, I always feel like something is missing. So, Yu Yi used the planetary devastation to create the moon. And it is several times larger than the moon made by Yu Yi in the original work. Just like in the previous life, a real satellite. When the moon was created, the gravitational tides brought by its huge volume directly caused the sea water to roll and surge. If left unchecked, a devastating flood could sweep away everything. Fortunately, Yu Yi suppressed all of this with the power of the Sharingan. It didn't cause much waves. When Yu Yi Hamura returned home, he found out that his father and mother were planning to get married. They only found out now that their mother and father had never been married before. So where did they come from? That is the question. The two of them were overwhelmed with emotions and didn't know what to do. I am more and more certain that I may not be my biological child. Especially when I saw the horns on Kaguya's head disappeared, then look at the little horn on your head. Before this, they were proud of it, as it represented that they were not picked up. But looking at it now, it is so conspicuous. And both father and mother are so good looking, why do they too look so ordinary? Especially Yu Yi, who wanted to cry but had no tears. But at this time, they had no choice but to suppress these messy thoughts. He began to act as a best man, Yu Yi followed Yu Yat, and Hamura followed Kaguya Hime. At this time, the sky was full of auspicious signs and colorful. All kinds of wonderful sounds are heard continuously, echoing in every corner of this world. People feel something. They looked pious, as if bathed in holy light, with their best wishes. Look up at the clouds on the horizon. Not only humans, but also countless summoning beasts that once came out of the snow world. At this time, they all looked up, gazing at the auspicious light in the sky, all of them looked fanatical and admiring. How lucky they are to be in this great world. They had witnessed the rise of legends and ended the trend of constant disputes. Usher in the unprecedented peace and unify the world. I also witnessed with my own eyes the four spirits of the gods filling the sky, which seem to be real today. Today, the Emperor's wedding is announced to the world. Let's celebrate together. This is an unprecedented day. This is a day destined to be recorded in history books and passed down from generation to generation. At this time, a bridge that was who knows how many miles long, across the sky, from one end of the sky to the other, Yoryukiyu appeared from the horizon in a white robe as white as snow, with a beautiful and flawless appearance. Princess Kaguya appeared from the other side of the bridge like a fairy in the moonlight, wearing a pure white dress and looking extremely graceful. The two of them stepped onto the bridge. It's like embarking on a lifelong journey together. And this admiration can be clearly seen throughout the world. The people of the Great Xia imperial court were originally very far away from the sky. Their mortal eyesight allowed them to only see the grand avenue that looked like a bridge. But Yu Yi used magic to project their admiration, illuminating the heavens. The scene on the bridge filled the entire sky and earth, and everyone could see it clearly. At this time, as Yu Yi and Kaguya stepped onto the bridge, the heavens contend, as if they were vaguely felt, and strange phenomena continued. Countless birds flocked to the phoenix. It began to fly and circle around Kaguya-ji, as if in celebration. The clouds in the sky changed their light, and began to flash pictures like a movie. Those are the bits and pieces of experiences that Yu Yi and Kaguya have had over the past decade. The flowers and trees sway and bloom at this moment, the breeze is no longer noisy, the harps and zithers are in harmony, everything in nature composed a magnificent piece of music at this moment. The whole world seems to be witnessing this moment. Empathize with it. People looked pious and touched, and each offered their best wishes. In the crowd, a young girl, with tears in her eyes, she remembered the pair of figures she had seen in the crowd. A perfect person made in heaven, like a fallen immortal. It turns out that they have always been standing at the top of this world. No wonder, no wonder. In addition to the legendary Emperor of Heaven and the Goddess of Mao, who else could have such a stunning face and such a charming demeanor? It turns out that Lord Emperor of Heaven and his men, have also been to this world. Regarding the deterioration of filial piety, let me explain here that Yu Yi's emotions have always been pure. He has the soul and thinking of an adult, and his personality has long been formed. Kaguya-ji has only taken care of him for 3 years at most. Under the growth attribute of the system, it can be said that she has only taken care of him for a few months. It is impossible for an adult to have any feelings for someone who only takes care of him for a few months, right? He has always liked her from the beginning to the end. Chapter 65. And such a scene appears in the minds of many people. Countless women wept at this moment. Most of them are native people of their ancestral country. But now, without exception, they choose to remain single for life. Your Highness! A woman whispered softly, a stunning beauty appears outside the Emperor's palace. Once you see the Emperor, your life will be ruined. Even though he has become the master of the entire world, becoming more lofty and unreachable than before, after the connection between heaven and earth was broken, even seeing his back became a luxury. But who knew that this was once their crown prince? Now, even saying that name has become a heinous crime for them. But even so, they always carefully hold that dream in their hearts. When you have seen the most amazing person in your life, it will be difficult to fall in love with anyone else for the rest of your life. At this moment, watching those two stunningly beautiful people slowly walking across the bridge, a glimmer of enlightenment arose in their hearts. They are the two most suitable people in the world. How could it not be them? They seemed to have grown up overnight, and they put their hands on their chests and silently offered their most sincere blessings. The vision in the clouds above was even more amazing. By now, night had fallen. Countless stars began to appear dimly, revealing one end. And those two figures who looked like exiled immortals, against the backdrop of the brilliant starry sky, it appears even more extraordinary and graceful. As the two people slowly approached, it seems to be the most beautiful and anticipated thing in the world. And it seems like they have a telepathic connection. All the people of the Great Xia Imperial Court quietly lit up their Kongming lanterns at this moment. It is filled with blessings to the Emperor of Heaven and the Goddess of Mao. Countless Kongming lanterns rose up at this moment. Looking from afar and from the sky, the scene is so spectacular. Every candle light represents everyone's most sincere blessing. The entire Great Xia Imperial Court and the entire world became dazzling at this moment. It forms one of the most stunning views in the world. Roar at the same time, a roar spread throughout the universe, shaking the heavens and the earth. That is the most ancient and vicissitudes of life roar, with nobility coming from deep in the blood. This roar also reached everyone's heart. People can personally feel the best wishes attached to that call. Following the cry, a silver dragon, whose length was unknown, appeared. He appeared from the clouds in the sky, puffing out clouds and mist. It began to circle around the Magpie Bridge. Its silver body complements the Magpie Bridge, making it even more beautiful. And finally, under the starry, dazzling sky, under the background of thousands of candles and rising Kongming lanterns, they approached as the silver dragon danced and circled, creating an alternative bridge with its huge body. At this time, a huge bright moon rose to the top of the sky and appeared behind them. At this moment, they used the starry sky, the bright moon, the silver dragon Magpie Bridge, and the lights of thousands of houses as the background. With the witness of heaven and earth, and the blessings of the world, we walked across the bridge, met and embraced each other. People will always remember this day. The starry sky, the bright moon hanging high in the sky, the lights of thousands of houses rising up, the silver dragon dances and circles, the Emperor of Heaven and the Goddess of Mao stepped onto the Magpie Bridge that stretched across the sky for thousands of miles. They met here. Since then, people call this day the Kixi Festival. This bridge is called Magpie Bridge and was built by the Emperor of Heaven to marry the Goddess of Mao. On this day, people began to have the custom of looking up at the bright moon. That is the yearning for the Emperor of Heaven and the Goddess of Mao. People started to have the custom of raising Kongming lanterns again. That is a blessing to the Emperor of Heaven and the Goddess of Mao. People started to have the habit of dragon boat racing again. It was a recreation of the scene where the Emperor of Heaven married the Goddess of Mao. From then on, people began to sing the song day and night, and it has been passed down through the ages. It should be like this. If things had developed along the normal trajectory and nothing unexpected had happened. So it must be like this. Are you scared? Yu Yi gently stroked Kaguya's face. Against the backdrop of the moonlight, she was breathtakingly beautiful and extremely graceful today. She put on the same dress she wore on their first date. At this moment, under the moonlight, it looks like a white wedding dress. Don't be afraid, Yetter finally married me. I'm so happy. Kaguya smiled sweetly, a blush appearing on her delicate face. You go first, dear. Yu Yi gently touched her cheek. Let's go together. Kaguya shook her head, with a stubborn look in her eyes, and said. Be obedient. Hago Romo Hamura is still waiting for you. I will be back soon. The Sharingan in Yu Yi's eyes slowly rotated, blooming with an indescribable brilliance. He spoke softly while looking into Kaguya Hime's eyes. Yetter. Kaguya's eyes started to become a little blurry. After a while, she suddenly closed her eyes. He came forward and put his arms around Yu Yi's neck. The rosy and tender lips moved towards Yu Yi's lips and gently kissed him. Feeling the soft touch of lips, Yu Yi closed his eyes and enjoyed this moment. He stretched out his hands and hugged Kaguya's trembling body tightly, tasting her red lips. After a long time, their lips parted. Princess Kaguya stared at Yu Yi with indescribable tenderness in her eyes. You must come back. She hugged Yu Yi tightly, leaned close to his ear and whispered softly. It was said that Yu Yi had gone to the Snow-Wind realm before, in the dream woven by Tsukuyomi, the words spoken at the last moment of separation. Can you wait for me to come back? Then you must come back. Yes, very soon. Yu Yi hugged her tightly and whispered. Then, ripples appeared in the space. Kaguya disappeared in Yu Yi's arms. She went to the space in Tiananjiu. He and Hago Romo Hamura will be waiting for Yu Yi there. If those 5 figures didn't appear at the same time in the outer space, then today should be the happiest day. The next moment, Yu Yi's expression became indifferent, and his aura became vicissitudes and ancient. He seemed to have returned from ancient times and no longer belonged to this era. An extremely huge amount of magical chakra exploded from his body. The wind and clouds changed accordingly. A layer of immortal robe appeared on his body. 18 truth-seeking balls slowly rotated behind him. At his current level, he can create as many truth-seeking balls as he wants. The next moment, ripples appeared in the space. He has arrived outside the starry sky. It would be a bit unreasonable not to invite the bride's family to the Otsutsuki family's wedding banquet. A figure said lightly. He had long silver hair that fell to his waist and wore an immortal robe. The face is blurry and unclear. There was an unusually bright vertical eye on his forehead, with mysterious lines appearing in it. There was no aura emanating from him, just like an ordinary person. But a ray of breath that was inadvertently revealed easily pierced the sky. I've been here for a long time. I saw you were having a wedding banquet, so I chose not to disturb you. He said softly. I'm sorry, everyone who likes Kaguya-sama. Due to some reasons, Kaguya-sama may have to say goodbye to you temporarily. It is expected that she will reappear around chapter 80. If you feel uncomfortable, you can skip these chapters for the time being, especially chapter 70, which may be a little. After this war, the main story of the Hokage will be told. Chapter 66. You chose option 1, nodded in agreement, and promised her a grand and dazzling wedding. Reward, 10 Sagan. After successfully walking across the Magpie Bridge with Princess Kaguya and completing the wedding, the system's rewards have arrived. At this moment, a warm current once again surged into Yu Yi's eyes. The originally red Sharingan merged into a ball of green light and an even more powerful pupil power. At this moment, it looks mysterious and unusually brilliant. From then on, the 3 major dojutsu among Hokage were basically concentrated on him alone. At this moment, 5 figures that reached the sky and the earth appeared simultaneously outside the starry sky. Their faces were blurred and unclear. Each of them had an ethereal, vast, eerie, and terrifying aura. It is like the boundless ocean, unfathomable. These 5 people were not any of the Otsutsuki clan that Yu Yi was familiar with, and appeared in the original work. There is a huge difference in aura and chakra. They are the real high-ranking members of the Otsutsuki clan. At this moment, they had indifferent expressions, wearing ancient immortal robes and looking down at everything in the world like gods. There was no trace of arrogance or disdain in their expressions. But there is a sense of nobility deep in the soul. It seemed to be passed down from generation to generation, unchanging, like an instinct from the blood. They are like the rulers of the starry sky, watching the ups and downs of the world, and everything is just like passing clouds. It was a look down upon everything, as cold as looking at an ant. Each of them has a vertical eye on his forehead. And under the gaze of the Rinnegan, the amount of chakra seemed so boundless that it was suffocating. This means that each of them has eaten at least 1 chakra fruit, maybe more than that. Each of them is as powerful as Princess Kaguya in the original novel, but at this time, 5 of them appeared at the same time. I saw you were having a wedding reception, so I chose not to interrupt. The leader said calmly, his words seemed gentle, easygoing, and polite. But that is to think that the ending is already predetermined. With a gift and charity from above, he looked at Yu Yi as if he were a dead person. This is an attitude that is more arrogant than any disdain or contempt. Then you should be thankful that you can live a little longer. Yu Yi just glanced at him indifferently, with a calm expression, and said no more. Interesting, I haven't met such an arrogant native in a long time. The figure was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter. The vertical eye on his forehead seemed to shine even brighter because of his emotional fluctuations. The four figures beside him also looked at Yi with interest. Then he showed disdain, as if he had heard the best joke. But in just a moment, it returned to normal. They have already conquered countless planets and have heard countless such bold statements. One of them said, "Interesting native, we might as well tell you that we arrived at this planet several months ago and entered your so-called royal court. Everything you secretly arranged seemed clumsy and ridiculous to us. Any struggle is useless, and all conspiracies and calculations are futile in the face of absolute strength." The man who was speaking was the tallest, and the horns on his head were the longest among the Otsutsuki clan that Yi knew. The vertical eye on his forehead had circles of golden ripples, mixed with other mysterious patterns. "It looks unusually bright." He grinned, not hiding his pride and arrogance at all. Yi looked indifferent, still expressionless, and it was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. The figure felt slightly disappointed. "You don't seem surprised." "What's the surprise?" "The surprise is that you can't hide your fear? You usually come in groups of 2, but now there are 5 of you here at the same time. Or are you guys so cautious? 5 of us came here but you still have to delay time to set up a ceiling formation in this starry sky. Or maybe it was an accident, your poor disguise, and the time you actually set foot in this starry sky was actually a year ago." Yi's eyes were as calm as a still well, so peaceful that it seemed as if not a single ripple could be stirred up. He said lightly. At this moment, the 5 Otsutsuki clan members all showed a look of surprise. They had indeed come here a year ago on the orders of the Ancestor Temple. According to rumors, this planet was far from being as simple as it seemed. But having all 5 of them arrive at the same time would have been the funniest joke ever. But the order of the Ancestral Temple cannot be disobeyed. When they saw the so-called heaven that had been established, they still thought that it was ignorant of the immensity of heaven and earth. But now it seems that this Emperor of Heaven is far from being as simple as he appears. At least, this person had actually discovered them a long time ago. A hint of heaviness flashed across the eyes of all 5 people. Long before the Onmyoji era, they had invaded this planet. And then, the disastrous defeat. This is also the reason why the Ancestral Temple issued an order for the 5 of them to come together. "We're just here to take back what's ours." One of the figures spoke up. He was the first person to speak. At this moment, the contempt in his eyes had disappeared. Even though he was an enemy, the demeanor of the man in front of him was enough to win his respect. "What's yours? And what's ours? The chakra refined with the vitality of this planet becomes yours," Yi said with some amusement. The 5 people were silent, and chose not to continue arguing on this topic. They were invaders. After hesitating for a while, "You know we have set up a magic circle, but you still dare to do this? Aren't you afraid?" A figure asked, and he frowned, somewhat confused. "You should be the ones who are scared." Yi sighed softly. At this moment, a bewitching power resounded throughout the entire space. The moment the words fell, the whole space, at this moment, everything seemed to be quiet. The 5 Otsutsuki were about to make a move. But suddenly he found his body stiffened at the same time. They looked into Yi's unusually bright Sharingan. The 9 black Megatama emitted endless green light, which was extremely dazzling. That powerful and frightening pupil power burst out at this moment. The space they were in was suddenly confined and the 5 people were unable to move. 5 figures appeared from behind the 5 Otsutsuki clans at the same time. They look indifferent, and their aura is timeless and ancient. It feels like walking through the long river of time. He held a sword made of the ashes of the dead and slashed at the 5 people at the same time. Squeak! 3 of them flashed by, and I don't know how they did it. He broke free from Yi's pupil power and appeared at the other end of the space. The vertical eyes on their foreheads were flashing with strange patterns, and it seemed that they were using some kind of pupil technique. 2 others were killed to ashes, with their bodies literally pierced through. As expected, their vitality died in the continuous collapse. But they both seemed unaware of the approach of death. He didn't care about the damage on his body, but said solemnly, "You actually have such amazing pupil power." Then, their bodies began to turn to ashes. However, in the next moment, it slowly recovered and reappeared safe and sound. Yi didn't expect this attack to be successful, he was just trying it. His 5 clones are exactly the same as his original body. It was created by combining the power of the Rinnegan and Tensegan, as well as yin-yang release. It has almost infinite chakra, just like the original body. At that moment, he used the Sharingan to not only confine this space, he even used the time pupil technique to restrict their time. But they still hid away. He was not surprised. How could Otsutsuki be so easily dealt with? The barrier that the five of them had jointly set up had already been found by Yu-Yi at the spatial node. With the help of the power of the Sharingan and combined with his own space ninjutsu, he secretly sabotaged. At this moment, Yu-Yi's aura became more and more vicissitudes and indifferent. The golden immortal robe on his body was billowing, and rich natural energy was bursting out of his body. The 18 truth-seeking balls then evolved into life and extinction. The real battle begins now. Chapter 67. The real battle begins now. Boom! The battle is about to begin. One of them waved his hand, and as he moved, a huge amount of chakra emanated from it, and a huge hand covered the sky and the moon. Suddenly appeared from the starry sky, he grabbed one of the Yu-Yis, I saw Yu-Yi's body swaying, and then he disappeared from the spot like Kaika Suijutsu. The next moment, back to the original place, his body was floating, his expression was as indifferent as ever. It was as if it had never disappeared and dodged the attack. This is the eye technique using Manjiki from the Sharingan. Just like Obito's hollow, he hid in another space in an instant. At the same time, an extremely large truth-seeking ball condensed from the other person's hand. Dark energy distorts space. That's the inflated truth-seeking ball. He attacked Yu-Yi who was closest to him. If Yu-Yi dodges this attack, if it falls onto a planet, it will cause immeasurable impact. Yu-Yi's expression remained unchanged, and a dazzling golden light emerged from his hand. Finally, it converged into a golden sword that was who knows how many miles long. With devastating force, he slashed at the expanding truth-seeking ball. Golden Wheel Reincarnation explodes. This is the power of Tensegan, the eye technique Golden Wheel Reincarnation explosion. At this moment, it collides with the expanding truth-seeking ball. Boom! The two forces also symbolize the power of creation and destruction. In this silent vacuum, a huge wave of air was stirred up. Circle after circle of shock waves echoed throughout the starry sky. Countless meteorites floating in the starry sky were annihilated at this moment. The huge energy even spread to the surface of the planet. This caused a huge crack to appear in the clouds above the Great Xia Imperial Court. Looking from afar, it was shocking, as if the sky was being torn apart at this moment. All the clones, at the same time, divide into 5 major battlefields and fight with 5 Otsutsuki together. A casual blow, the power to destroy the world, it can easily destroy an asteroid belt. Various magics are flying, colorful. At this moment, the starry sky seemed to be burning with brilliant fireworks. After some mutual testing, the chakras in all of Yu-Yi's bodies began to surge together. The next moment, a huge armor that covered the sky and the moon was formed. There were several golden giants that were countless miles long and stood tall. Appearing simultaneously outside the starry sky, this is the complete Susanoo. With the blessing of Tensegan, his pupil power was much stronger than before. At this time, Susanoo is already many times better than the Susanoo in the original book. Several Susanos are about 1/10 the size of the Earth. At this time, more than half of the planet was covered in shadow. The world seemed to have fallen into darkness at this moment. All living creatures on the planet, no matter where you are, you can see the golden giant that covers the sky and the moon beyond the starry sky. This is truly all-encompassing. The 5 Otsutsuki also looked at each other, because Susanoo was covered with Senjutsu Chakra and Amaterasu Black Flame, so they can't absorb it directly. At this time, the chakra in the body also began to surge. After a while, armors in various chakra forms began to gather on them. It also formed a Susanoo like Yu-Yi. Susanoo is derived from the Manjiki Sharingan, the power of the sacred tree of the earth. Yu-Yu thought it was unique to the earth, but now it seems that those Otsutsuki who have actually eaten the chakra fruit also have similar powers. Although the form is different. If Yu-Yi's Susanoo is like a giant in armor covering the sky and the moon, then Otsutsuki's chakra armor is more like a mecha monster. Especially the horns on the head, which are also derived from the chakra armor and are more obvious. From a distance, it looks like a huge monster with 2 horns on its head. At this moment, all kinds of brilliant colors of chakra are spreading. It was like entering an interstellar mecha war, dazzling and brilliant. Each impact created a huge shock wave. Can be transmitted from the stars to the earth, the whole world was in a constant tremor. It was like the prelude to the end of the world. The rivers and seas began to surge, the mountains and rivers trembled, and huge rocks rolled down. Even cracks began to appear in the earth. And a dazzling ultimate, a huge sword beam that is tens of thousands of miles long, it fell from the starry sky and slashed towards the Great Xia Imperial Court. If this attack is carried out, the entire city will be destroyed. All the citizens of the Great Xia Imperial Court felt that a disaster was imminent at this moment. When the sword light was about to fall, a golden shield suddenly rose above the entire Great Xia Imperial Court. Boom! The attack fell, the earth trembled, the golden shield began to be covered with spider web-like cracks. Then he gradually retreated. But in the end, he successfully resisted the attack. That's the Lord Emperor of Heaven, protecting us. Some people of the Great Xia Imperial Court trembled and said, they had never felt death so close to them. When they thought they were doomed, it was the Emperor of Heaven who saved them. Everyone looked at the figure that spanned the sky and the earth outside the starry sky. He was alone, fighting bloody battles. We can't wait to go together with Lord Tiandi to kill the enemy. Everyone was filled with sorrow and tears welled up in their eyes at this moment. They have their motherland and their homeland behind them, but they cannot protect it themselves. Instead, he could only look up at that figure, fighting alone in the outer space. How sad is this? Why does the Lord Emperor of Heaven have to endure all this alone, with no one to accompany him? Everyone asked, but got no answer. Come on, Lord Tiandi. We are with the Lord Emperor of Heaven. Countless people shouted loudly at this moment, bursting out with amazing cohesion. The same is true for everything in nature. At this moment, heaven and earth mourn together. Mount Maiboku. The Great Emperor. Gamamaru looked at the 5 major battlefields divided outside the starry sky with tears in his eyes. The scenes that emerged in the dream seemed to become clearer and clearer as the picture appeared. The Emperor of Heaven fights against 5 supreme alien races alone. But the final outcome is... No, I don't believe it. Who in this world can be a match for the Lord Emperor of Heaven? In the empty cave, Toadmaru's unwilling roar and roar were heard. But the scene in the dream became clearer and clearer, and a fear was born in its heart. Because the scene in the dream showed that the Emperor of Heaven would be defeated. For the first time in history, it hated the dream it had so much. I also hate its ability to dream and predict things. I had a dream about the life and death ceremony of the Emperor of Heaven, and since then I have never dared to dream about my life. Toadpill fell to the ground in a daze, fear spreading through him. Protect Daxia. Kill the demons. Swallow the enemies with blood. How I wish I could follow the Emperor to fight on the battlefield. You are alone outside the vast starry sky. There is no one behind you, fighting alone with blood and tears. We want to be with you. I wish to accompany the Lord Emperor of Heaven. Loyal bones are buried everywhere in the Green Mountains, why should I return home wrapped in horsehide? At this moment, countless soldiers from the Great Xia Imperial Court had their clothes wet with tears. They had followed that figure and conquered the world, and now, they still wanted to go together. They hoped to lend a helping hand to that figure. Defending the country is the soldier's duty. When the entire civilization was at a critical moment of life and death, this country showed amazing cohesion. Chapter 68. The starry sky seemed to be completely ignited at this moment. The battle that covered the sky and the moon seemed to tear this space apart completely. The starry sky shook, planets fell, like the gods fighting each other. One after another, enormous amounts of energy spread out, sweeping across the world. Any random ray of energy that falls on the earth will sweep across the entire surface of the planet in an instant. Cause immeasurable impact. All living beings on the entire planet feel that the end is approaching. It seems like the sky will fall and the earth will collapse at any time. From afar, there were rumbling thunder and rolling dark clouds, stirring up the wind and clouds of heaven and earth, a sign of doomsday. Many living beings feel oppressed, and their hearts are in great pain. But I can only look up at the sky and look at that light. That figure who traveled across the sky and across the earth, fighting against powerful enemies alone. He is bleeding in the starry sky, he is fighting. As his people, it seems that all we can do at this moment is pray. Outside the outer space, floating asteroid belts were cut down one after another. A huge beam of energy shot out from the starry sky and rushed straight into the sky. Countless huge chakras are scattered in the depths of the starry sky. If this level of fighting continues, the storm of battle will soon sweep across the entire surface of the planet. It will surely cause great suffering to all living beings. Yu Yuaki attacked the white-robed Piaoju, raised his hand and waved, blocking an attack heading towards the earth. At the same time, he used space ninjutsu to divert another attack. He looked indifferent, and there was no emotion in his Sharingan, which was glowing with green light. 9 black megatamas slowly rotated, containing endless depth like the starry sky. And the next moment, outside the starry sky, the 5 Yu's attacks accelerated at the same time. In both eyes, the pupil power of the Sharingan and Tensegan burst out at the same time. An extremely huge energy was attached to the Susanoo sword. At this moment, space is distorted, time is paused, and all kinds of life and extinction evolve accordingly. The golden giant stood with a sword in his hand, his aura vast and vicissitudes. Boom! He slashed out with his sword, as if it was slashed out from the long river of time. At this moment, there was an extremely bright light coming from the starry sky, like a glance of 10,000 years. With the confinement of space, the vicissitudes of time, and the exhaustion of time, the sword cut through Otsutsuki's chakra armor. This is the power of the Golden Wheel Tensei explosion combined with the expansion of the truth-seeking ball. It is mixed with changes in space and time. The Otsutsuki body rolled back and forth, crashing into an asteroid. Boom! The rubble spread across the sky, and asteroids exploded and shattered into pieces in the starry sky. That Otsutsuki roared, the vertical eye on his forehead glowed with strange light, and he recovered quickly. He was about to fight back, but the next moment, the world seemed to shift at this moment. Looking back, he was already in the furnace, in a sea of fire. And like him, there are 3 other Otsutsuki, without exception, they all took Yuyi's thundering attack. Chakra armor was broken, and when it was restored, Yuyi then absorbed them into the 4 spaces in the heaven realm at the same time. If we continue to fight in this vacuum, the energy fluctuations that spread to the earth will destroy the entire world. At this moment, several huge figures that covered the sky and the moon suddenly disappeared. The real starry sky is silent at this moment. Only Otsutsuki and Yuyi were left. What did you do? The Otsutsuki asked angrily. The chakra armor on his body was already in tatters. Very weak breath. Yuyi did not answer him. The next moment, he took the initiative to attack and fight with him. They grappled with each other, and exchanged several blows. Powerful energy fluctuations spread out, making the mountains and rivers lose their color. At this time, Yuyi's aura became stronger and stronger. He actually grew rapidly during the battle. The more Otsutsuki fought, the more frightened he became. Bang! The next moment, Yuyi's golden sword was enchanted with the divine flame of Amaterasu. A dazzling sword light swept across the past, present, and future. The starry sky trembles at this moment. The endless sword light was like a golden avenue that stretched for thousands of miles, becoming more and more dazzling in the starry sky. That Otsutsuki shouted loudly, the boundless chakra in front of him surged, and in an instant, it condensed into a green shield. The shield stood tall and straight, spanning the starry sky, with mysterious patterns spreading across it. Covering thousands of miles, it carries the vicissitudes and heaviness of time. The next moment, boom! The sword light slashed at the shield, and endless brilliance filled the starry sky. Time and space seemed to be silent at this moment. The huge shock wave caused countless asteroids to deviate from their original orbits. Countless meteorites were flying everywhere, and the stars were dim here. With one blow, the galaxy lost its luster. The Great Xia Imperial Court, thousands of miles away, was all covered in white light. The Otsutsuki was breathing heavily, with a visibly flash of fear in his eyes. But the next moment, a figure stepped out from behind him. I've said it before, you should be the ones who are afraid. Yuyi had no expression on his face and sighed. The next moment, a sword containing the power of time and space condensed in his hand. The Sharingan of the Samsara sword glowed with an indescribable brilliance. This is him using his pupil technique to its ultimate level. An atmosphere that contains the infinite changes and vicissitudes of time and space is spreading at this moment. Squeak feather Yuryuaki sword piercing, it was as if it were a sword that was truly cut out from the long river of time. That Otsutsuki wanted to dodge, struggle, but his time has already been stopped at this moment. I can't even think. He was pierced straight by the sword, and his body began to age and decay. His time seemed to be accelerated at this moment. It was just a short moment, but it felt like a lifetime. His face was full of wrinkles and he had grown old in the blink of an eye. Life is constantly slipping away. You. His figure was hoarse, looking at Yuyi, wanting to say something, but unable to. But the next moment, he seemed to see something funny. The face full of Madara lines began to laugh wildly. You actually have merged with the sacred tree. Ha 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 ha. Otsutsuki Yuyi. You are so sad. He said. There was a flash of pleasure in his eyes. The wood grain of a tree has already appeared on Yu Yi's face. He had a blank expression on his face, said nothing more, and drew his sword. Since then, Otsutsuki has been completely reduced to ashes in the sword of time. The first one. Yu Yi murmured, a hint of turbidity flashing in his eyes. He said no more. I shook my head, and the image of Kaguya appeared in my mind. His eyes regained clarity and he suppressed the backlash from the sacred tree. They should be coming out soon. Yu Yi muttered to himself. As a member of the Otsutsuki clan who have eaten the chakra fruit, they can naturally escape the constraints of the heavenly realm. Before this, it was only because he was angered by the clone and entangled with it that he did not choose to come out at the first time. At this time, if you sense that the breath of an Otsutsuki has dissipated, it will naturally come out. Yu Yi's eyes were deep and no one knew what he was thinking. He began to wave his hands continuously, using chakra to carve countless spells in this space. Chapter 69. Please focus on the Hokage plot later. This is a Hokage fanfiction. In the realm of heaven, inside the furnace space, Otsutsuki, who was fighting with Yu Yi's clone, had a visibly changed expression. He noticed that his companion's breath was disappearing. This means there is a high possibility of accidents happening. He no longer hesitated and began to launch an offensive, repelling Yu Yi's clone in front of him. The next moment, mysterious lines flashed across the pupils on his forehead. The space rippled, and he left this space. It's coming out. Yu Yi murmured. He could clearly feel the fluctuations and ripples coming from the space. At this time, far inside the planet, where the Great Xia Imperial Court was located, a research base buried deep underground is issuing complex instructions. Countless witches and scientific researchers are busy here. The next moment, as if receiving some order, with solemn expressions, they slowly walked to the center of a machine and pressed a button. The next moment, a huge launch pad slowly emerged from the border of the Great Xia Imperial Court. A streamlined and complex creation was rushing towards the sky at this moment. That is, a nuclear bomb. It is extremely fast, but the Otsutsuki clan can easily dodge it using space ninjutsu. However, when its kinetic potential energy reaches its peak, the next moment, a formation spread out from above, enveloping it and disappearing. 8 Otsutsuki came out from the space in the sky. Yu Yi had already carved out the spell, which affected his perception. When he came out, the portal of a space tunnel had opened, facing him directly. Then, an extremely dark object flew out of the tunnel and hit him. His body instinctively flashed a strong warning and tried to dodge. But the magic that Yu Yi had arranged in advance caused his movements to slow down. It was too late to hide now. The Otsutsuki who had just come out opened his eyes wide, with a flash of fear in them. He was about to say something. The next moment, the thing had fallen on him. Boom! A huge mushroom cloud appeared from the starry sky. At this moment, it formed the most brilliant fireworks. This is a TNT equivalent of tens of millions of tons, producing a violent nuclear fusion reaction. The temperature is highest at the center of the explosion, 1,000 times higher than the center of the sun. A boundless sea of fire spread from it, engulfing everything. The power of the explosion and the shock wave it formed covered and destroyed everything. At the same time, endless nuclear radiation spread across the starry sky with the explosion. Yu Yi had been hiding far away, staring at the center of the nuclear bomb explosion with a frown. Under the Samsara Sharingan, the countless radioactive particles that suddenly appeared in the vacuum were clearly visible. The nuclear bomb is the main project that Yu Yi has asked the Great Xia Imperial Court to research and develop over the past 10 years. Even with the national strength of the Great Xia Imperial Court, they have only developed one in the past 10 years. This was the backup plan prepared for the Otsutsuki clan. How could he not have made preparations over the past 10 years? At this point, the effect seems pretty good. I could see the center of the nuclear bomb, under the perspective of the Sharingan. The Otsutsuki who just came out was already barely breathing. The vertical eye on his forehead continued to emit a strange light. He was given a second chance to live, but he was only holding on for a breath. His body has been invaded by a large amount of radiation, which is constantly destroying his vitality. Yu Yi has taken a step forward, chakra armor and fairy chakra surging on his body. Resist radiation particles, he used the yin-yang escape technique to condense a sword in his hand and made the final move. What is that? This Otsutsuki's voice was weak and puzzled. The power of technology. Yu Yi rarely explained more. Then, he stabbed a sword into his body. His last bit of life was also wiped out by Yin Yang escape. The second one. Yi murmured, his eyes deep. The remaining 3 Otsutsuki noticed that the auras of their 2 teammates disappeared one after another. He also realized that something was wrong and no longer stayed in the space in Tianziyu. The next moment, they returned to the main world almost in no particular order. Where did they go? I can't detect the presence of my companions. Their eyes flashed solemnly, and they looked at each other and asked. They really couldn't believe that in such a short time, Yi was able to kill both of them. You can go down and ask in person. Yi's expression was calm, still showing no emotion at all. He just stared at them as if they were dead. It was exactly the same expression they showed at the beginning. Ah! I'll kill you! 8 Otsutsuki roared, his eyes were red. Emotions were completely out of control at this moment. His body suddenly became twisted and huge. After a while, it turned into a monster that covered the sky and the moon. This is a tailed beast transformation just like the rabbit form that Princess Kaguya transformed into in the original work. The remaining 2 Otsutsuki looked at each other with serious expressions. Roar! At this moment, a roar spread throughout the netherworld. I saw a huge silver dragon that was who knows how many miles long and flew out from a space door. Its aura is supreme and powerful, with a nobility that comes from deep in its blood. There is also a sense of vastness and vicissitudes from ancient times. Even the few Otsutsuki who were still alive felt that their bloodlines were being suppressed. I actually felt like I was paying homage to the species in front of me. What is this again? An Otsutsuki said angrily, completely panicking. But no one answered him. The moment he saw the silver dragon appear, Yi raised a smile. This is a smile that is only shown to those closest to you. The silver dragon flew around Yi for a few circles, and finally came to Yi's side and stopped obediently. You don't have to come. I can handle it myself. Yi whispered softly and reached out to touch the silver dragon's head. Compared to the past, the silver dragon's body is larger. The aura on its body also became more vicissitudes and vast, and traces of dragon power spread from it. It seems that he is not far from becoming a dragon. The silver dragon didn't say anything, but just rubbed his hand obediently. There was a humanized flash of worry in those golden eyes. Well, let's fight to our heart's content today. Yi whispered. At this moment, an astonishing momentum burst out from his body. The huge chakra overflowed, making the starry sky dim. His aura was vicissitudes and vastness, and wood stripes spread across his body. He was no longer prepared to suppress the sacred tree. At this moment, he wanted to make a quick decision. After all, Kaguya is still waiting for him to come home. With the addition of Yin Jiao, the battle ended quickly. It fought alone against the tailed beast Otsutsuki. As for Yi, he fought against 2 Otsutsuki alone. At this moment, he used all his means. From various ninjutsu, illusion, space ninjutsu, pupil technique, launch at this moment. Fighting 1 against 2 without losing the upper hand. And finally, the battle reached a climax. All I saw was a huge Buddha that was who knows how many miles long and covered the sky and the moon. Emerging from this starry sky, immortal technique, transform the Buddha on the top of the head. With the blessing of Sharingan and Tensegan, the Buddha at this time was extremely large, far exceeding the previous complete form of Susanoo. He spans the starry sky, stands tall and proud, and on the body of this big Buddha, there is a huge chakra armor wrapping him. It is the Susanoo Buddha. With a sinister aura and thousands of arms dancing, it launched the final attack. The starry sky was silent, the battle was desolate, and as the Susanoo Buddha's final blow fell, the remaining 3 Otsutsuki were like candles in the wind, their vitality was being extinguished. The vertical pupils in his eyes also began to dim. The leader, 8 Otsutsuki, had disheveled hair. He looked crazy, and his time was running out. But at this moment he suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed, ha ha ha, Otsutsuki Yi, do you think there are only 5 of us here? Where is your wife? Where is your child? Feel carefully, is she still in the space you created? Why do you think your wedding wasn't ruined by us? That was just a promise that being made to your wife. And why did your wife suddenly want to marry you? That was just her last request. Chapter 62, Kaguya Hymes. Soliloquy. Chapter 70. I'm afraid you guys can't accept it, so I deleted tens of thousands of words to speed up the pace. This is the last cut. Do you think there are only 5 of us here? Your wife has already been captured. Otsutsuki's eyes were bloodshot and filled with madness. Yi didn't say anything. But his body trembled slightly. He recalled the details of his time with Kaguya these days. Only then did he realize that he was not the only one worried, she was too. No wonder she has been absent-minded these days and suddenly proposed to get married. With her personality, how could she take the initiative to propose marriage? No wonder even when such a big battle happened, Princess Kaguya didn't really participate. Because she has always been facing a more dangerous enemy. During this period, Yi was somewhat overwhelmed by the news that Kaguya proposed marriage. So many details were overlooked. Before this, Yuruaki Naoki was feeling uneasy. Through the operation of the heavenly secrets, I always have the feeling that disaster is about to happen at any time. I had always thought that there were only these 5 Otsutsuki. But now I think, how can they bring such a sense of oppression by themselves? Who on earth could not even resist someone as proud as Kaguya? Kaguya-sama is facing, what on earth is she facing? The silver dragon looked at him with some concern and made a humming sound. I want to comfort you, but I don't know how. Yi's body trembled a little, trying to force himself to calm down. But I found that I couldn't do it at all. What did you say? Yi's voice was hoarse and his eyes were bloodshot. Otsutsuki Yi. Your wife is dying, you are so pathetic. She probably is. The Otsutsuki laughed, his eyes flashing with bloodthirsty delight. However, before he could finish his next words, he stopped abruptly. Squeak! A long sword with the breath of time has pierced into his body. His appearance at this moment is decayed and old, under the power of time, his last bit of life was extinguished. He fell down forever with reluctance and a strange smile. At the same time, the other 2 Otsutsuki were also like this. At this moment, they were killed at the same time by Yi's clones. Until this time, Yi took a deep breath and said nothing more. The next moment, the Sharingan in the eyes activated. There were ripples in the space, and a dark space-time gate appeared. He and Yin Jiao looked at each other and walked in. This is a space that comes with the Sharingan, similar to Obito's Kamui space. However, the scene inside had already been modified by Yi. This appears to be an island. The sky is clear and the clouds are endless. Looking around, you can see mountains upon mountains, and the air is filled with fairy air. It's like a fairyland on an island. The endless ocean, under the dim light, the water ripples. In front of the beach, there is a huge castle. Everything complements each other and the scenery is pleasant. This was supposed to be used by Yi and Kaguya for their honeymoon. If I want to completely retire from the world in the future, I plan to settle here. But at this moment, Yi could clearly feel a completely unfamiliar aura lingering. A great battle once took place here. When I got closer, Yi and Hamura were already unconscious. They were breathing weakly and had many wounds on their bodies. Yi used Yang Attribute Chakra to repair their injuries. Wake them up and ask them why. It is learned that Kaguya has been captured by a mysterious man. They wanted to stop him, but they were no match for him. If Kaguya hadn't stopped the man from making further moves, it is estimated that both of them have died at this time. Father, can you bring mother back? Yi choked up, his eyes were bloodshot and full of resentment. Hamura didn't say anything, but there was a determination in his red eyes. The look in their eyes said it all, they wanted to go too. Yi took a deep breath. Without saying anything more, he had the feeling that he was dealing with the details in front of him, but his home was being robbed. Saving Princess Kaguya is not an easy task, Yi has to come up with a foolproof plan. He did not stay long. 3 days later, Yi brought Yi and Yukin, as well as the Silver Dragon, Abe Kiyoshige, the evil god and other members of the Heavenly Court. They broke into the ancestral home of the Otsutsuki clan. He used his divination to deduce countless times the details of what would happen during the trip to Otsutsuki. Finally, with the joint efforts of everyone, Kaguya was successfully rescued. But at the same time, he is being hunted by the Otsutsuki clan. The Otsutsuki clan sent out their members one after another, following all the way and hunting them down on earth. Finally, an unprecedented war broke out. This is a true battle of gods. Unprecedented in history. There are not only members of the Heavenly Court, but also countless summoning beasts. And the entire human force, they work together to resist the enemy. When the planet's survival is at stake, the world shows amazing cohesion. But the end result is the entire surface of the earth, countless cities, were destroyed by Otsutsuki. Countless continents collapsed, and 3/4 of the land area was sunk. Countless lives died, the world's population plummeted, and the Great Xia imperial court ceased to exist. In the face of absolute power, unity seems so pale and powerless. That silver dragon was extraordinary and contributed a lot. Yulong fought several Otsutsuki alone, but in the end he was unable to hold his own. He was seriously injured and fell into a deep sleep. Hago Romo Hamura has grown up, showing amazing style. He is worthy of the name Six Paths. The two of them joined forces. He showed his amazing power, which frightened the Otsutsuki clan. But he was outnumbered and was ultimately defeated, and was finally rescued by his father. They suffered multiple injuries and were recuperating. And there are also many outstanding people among humans, who have gone against the will of heaven with their mortal bodies. He was a general of the Great Xia imperial court. He had no name. His life was in danger, but in desperation he realized the supreme sword art. With a mortal body, he killed 8 Otsutsuki. That was the last masterpiece of the Great Xia imperial court. That day, his sword broke, and he knelt on the ground, his life force being gradually extinguished. He looked up at the sky for the last time. Lord Emperor of Heaven, can I get back my name? That day, it rained heavily, as if to see him off. Abe Kyoji absorbed the spirits of all onmyoges from ancient times to the present. As the last yin-yang master in the world, she protected the dignity of her lineage. She followed in the footsteps of her ancestors and fought in the starry sky. She was dressed in white, with a stunning figure. Just like Abe Haruaki once was. In the end, she fought and killed 2 Otsutsuki high-ranking officials alone. Died in blood and tears, died in Yuyi's arms. When Yuyi arrived, her limbs had been cut off. Mr. Succubus, can you smile a little, just for a moment? She moved her body, probably wanting to reach out and touch Yuyi's face. But she couldn't do it, there was blood and flesh everywhere, and her hand had been chopped off long ago. She finally said softly, with little stars in her eyes. Just like when Yuyi first saw her, bright and dazzling. Finally, she closed her eyes forever. Yuyi didn't say anything. He couldn't laugh, he really couldn't laugh. When his old friends died one by one in the war, he felt endless sadness in his heart. He couldn't laugh anymore, he hadn't been able to laugh for a long time. The decisive battle finally came, and the Otsutsuki clan mobilized in full force. Launched an unprecedented offensive. At this time, the world is desolate and lifeless. The world is losing its vitality, heaven and earth are mourning, and the whole world is sad. The only ones who still have the strength to fight are Yuyi and Kaguya. Yuyi wants to send Kaguya away. Any planet would be fine, but Kaguya just shook her head and held his hand. They didn't speak and fought the powerful enemy together. This battle lasted for several days. Princess Kaguya eventually lost her soul in order to protect Yuyi. He couldn't even recover the Rinnegan's Gaiden Tensei technique, and couldn't even summon the impure world reincarnation. On that day, the sky was raining blood, and a figure that reached the sky and the earth was bleeding in the depths of the starry sky. The Emperor of Heaven was in great pain. His black hair turned white, his body was glowing, and he fully realized the supreme truth. He killed all the invading Otsutsuki by himself. Only 1 out of 10 survives. They hurried back to their ancestral home, but he was pursued by the Emperor of Heaven alone. He was alone, burning his life, casting secret spells, and eventually killing his way through the entire Otsutsuki. But deep in the starry sky, there is great terror. An ancient tree rooted in the starry sky took action. That is the root of Otsutsuki, the beginning of it all. The Emperor of Heaven was ultimately defeated. The Emperor of Heaven thus became desolate, but because he possessed the immortality of the sacred tree, survived after all. Eventually, all the Otsutsuki clan joined forces to seal it on the moon. What awaits him may be the gradual erosion of his sanity. Eventually being assimilated and losing oneself. The war ends here. The Otsutsuki race became lonely in the starry sky. They stopped slaughtering the remaining creatures on Earth and abandoned all the colonized planets. They had long been frightened by the killing of the Emperor of Heaven, and their population was already dwindling. At this time, 99% of them had been slaughtered. In the end, he chose to return to his ancestral temple to linger on, and never go out. And the story of the Earth has just begun. For those who think the protagonist's fighting power is broken, there is an explanation in chapter 78, because too much was deleted and only the core plot was retained, which was not explained clearly. There are different opinions on whether the nuclear bomb can defeat 8 Otsutsuki. This is a seriously injured Otsutsuki who was completely hit by the protagonist's time confinement. The energy generated by the explosion at the core of the nuclear bomb is still very terrifying. For specific reference, the Tsar has a TNT equivalent of 50 million. It is unlikely to resist it with physical strength. In the end, the protagonist also made a finishing blow. Even some immortal civilizations cannot resist nuclear bombs head-on but dodge them. Why do some people think Otsutsuki can? And this is the top fighting power from the previous life. It is impossible to write it as weak, right? Chapter 71. A Great War, a World of Loneliness. This is so sad. The world has fallen into an unprecedented low point. It will probably take another 1,000 years to recover. Hagoromo and Hamura survived, but they felt that life was worse than death. The heaven that once floated above all living things had long been destroyed in the war. The world is in ruins. The familiar world is also shattered. At this time, there were only 2 of them left, and they were filled with great sorrow. But even they were seriously injured and have not recovered until now. In the final decisive battle, the 2 of them wanted to fight despite being injured. But he was thrown out by Yuuki. Although he was able to save his life, he had also lost a lot of his vitality. Now they are old, their faces are old and decayed, their hair is grey. It is hard to imagine that they are actually in their prime at this time. With that great war, their hearts were dead. They began to come to the moon, find a way to break Yui's seal. But when several Otsutsuki joined forces, how could it be so easy to break through? They had tried many times but to no avail, wasting their remaining vitality and their bodies becoming increasingly decayed. When life is about to be completely extinguished, from the interior of the moon, a strong chakra came into their bodies. This is the chakra from Yui. This chakra is vast and boundless, as if it has no boundaries. It is the chakra amount of the complete sacred tree fruit. The 2 of them began to regain new vitality and live a second life. Yui and Hamura looked at each other's increasingly younger bodies. As always, they cried. "Father, where are you?" They choked up, unable to hold back their sadness any longer, and asked loudly. But all they got in response was the endless loneliness of the moon. Success or failure is all in vain. The old friend has gone, the dead are gone, even if you don't get an answer, but they knew that he was there, he had always been there. "Father, we will live well." Their voices were hoarse and they whispered softly, but they were no longer sad. When they were young, they also fantasized about growing up. But the real growth happened overnight. At the moment when the old man passed away and the war came. But the price of growing up is too heavy. It was a baptism of blood and tears. At this moment, they woke up from a dream. Feel the warm and vast chakra in your body. There is no trace of suicidal intent in them anymore, and they have returned to their prime. They knelt on the moon and kowtowed 3 times. After guarding for 3 days and 3 nights, he left. Yui is the Emperor of Heaven, the ruler of the world, and the master of heaven and earth. They want to protect this world for Yui. Yui and Hamura began to repair the broken earth. They have set foot in every place in this world, use the Yang Chakra to restore vitality to the earth bit by bit. Because of that war, plague and disease began to spread across the world. Humanity has fallen into a great earth valley, and its physical fitness has generally declined. So, they spread the chakra given by Yui to the world. Used to improve the physical constitution of the world's people so that living things can survive and continue to reproduce. Feather robes traveled all the way, and the name of 6 paths spread throughout the world. At the same time, in order to better spread chakra, the ninja sect was founded. From now on, the ninja world will be established. And to follow the words of my father. 100 years later, they began to marry and have children. Hagoromo chose to develop and expand the ninja clan and continue to spread chakra. Hamura chose to move his entire clan back to the moon to continue protecting Yui. Many years later, Hagoromo had 2 children named Indra and Ashura. Indra inherited Hagoromo's sage eyes, while Ashura inherited the sage body. Among them is the power from Yui and Kaguya. Every year, they would take Indra and Ashura to the moon, accompany the Emperor of Heaven, let them trace back to the source, and tell them about the Great War. Although they were young, they were deeply shocked. Especially when it comes to the Emperor of Heaven, he goes straight to the Otsutsuki ancestral temple. Being alone, Otsutsuki was frightened and hid himself from the world. They couldn't imagine what a brilliant and glorious world that would be, or what a desolate world it would be. Their hearts were filled with excitement, and they wished they could go back to that era and follow that figure that traveled across the sky to conquer the starry sky. Then, where is grandmother? They asked cautiously. As soon as he asked this question, Yurobe and Hamura choked at the same time. The entire moon began to tremble. Since then, neither of them dared to ask again. Many years later, Indra and Ashura grew up. They both inherited their father's wishes. Unleash the seal of Yi, carry forward the ninja clan, and continue to spread chakra to the world. Indra devoted himself to scientific research, and naturally, unlocking the seal on Yi became his only ambition. Ashura wanted to inherit the ninja sect, spread chakra, and promote love and peace. Indra is a genius. From childhood to adulthood, he showed extraordinary wisdom. When he found that ordinary people could not channel chakra well, he then created 12 seal techniques to better guide and use chakra. Yi saw hope in him to unlock Yi's seal. He had high hopes for him and wanted to pass on the ninja clan to him. But he said that was not his intention. I just wanted to focus on scientific research, so I turned it down and gave it to Ashura. There was deep disappointment in Yi's eyes, but also relief. For him, unlocking Yi's seal was naturally the first priority. At the same time, Yi's lifespan is about to end. Before he died, he completely separated the chakra that Yi had given him. Because chakra was so huge, he divided it into 9 parts and scattered them all over the earth. From then on, 1 to 9 tails was formed. Yi returned to the moon and finally passed away here. And the same as him is Hamura. When Hago Romo Hamura passed away, there was a heavy rain on the moon. It seemed like they were seeing him off. From then on, an era was completely desolate. Hago Romo Hamura. Inside the moon, Yi whispered. His mind was already blurred at this moment, and confusion flashed in his eyes from time to time. The seal of the moon cannot hold him. If he wants to break the seal, he can do so at any time. It's not that we can't, but that we don't want to. In this world without Princess Kaguya, what's the point of going out? He didn't think of using infinite Tsukuyomi, that's too low level. For him at this moment, infinite Tsukuyomi was full of flaws at a glance. He can deceive the world but he cannot deceive himself. With his state of mind, there is no need for him to indulge in illusions and live in depression. More importantly, he was afraid that he would lose control. At that time, no one will be able to stop him. It's more like he's sealing himself off. At the same time, he was waiting. Waiting for time to completely corrode him, waiting for the sacred tree to wear away his will. Also waiting for the future, Kaguya Hymns, Glimmer of Hope. Chapter 72. After Yi Hamura passed away, Indra and Ashura also saw him off on the moon. They sat here in mourning for 3 months. When Yi died, he personally told them his 2 major wishes in life. He had personally experienced the cruelty of war. I never want to experience again that kind of sadness where so many lives are lost and the world is lonely. He hopes for world peace and no more wars. And, unlock Yi's seal. When saying this, they saw in Yi's eyes the deep emotions when looking at the moon. It was a mixture of respect, complexity, longing, and many other emotions towards Emperor Yi. In their hearts, they became more determined to break the seal of the Heavenly Emperor, who was also their grandfather. Indra began to study ninjutsu and various sealing techniques, and devoted himself to scientific research. At the same time, he also read various works of Yi that were left in the ruins of heaven. This is what Yi had seen when the heavenly palace was first built. The various ninjutsu that were researched were recorded on it. Impure World Reincarnation, Shiki Seal, Sage Mode, the original Flying Thunder God, and many more. Basically, all the ninjutsu that appeared in the original work were studied and recorded by Yi. But they are all Chinese characters. From then on, Indra embarked on the arduous journey of deciphering the Chinese language. Ashura was looking for a way to break the seal, while continuing to develop and expand the ninja clan and promote love and peace. It seems that they are all working hard on their father's will. However, they did not know what a sad fate was waiting for them. That would be a fateful feud that would last for 1,000 years. And the trigger of the incident was human war. The only thing that never changes is time. The world is fickle and the most complicated thing in the world is the human heart. With the fall of the heavenly court, the great Xia imperial court fell apart. Euro spreads chakra throughout the world, and the world eventually recovers bit by bit. Under the power of time, when humans no longer worry about reproduction and survival, war breaks out as expected. The remaining humans began to divide into 2 major factions. Some people want to rebuild the great Xia imperial court, hoping to restore its former glory. For this purpose, they approached Indra and Ashura. I hope they can rebuild the heaven and protect the world again. The first one to be found was of course Indra, as Yu Yi's eldest grandson. He has the full legal right and is the most qualified. But Indra was devoted to scientific research and was not interested in this. They found Ashura again, but Ashura felt ashamed and declined. In his opinion, apart from that figure, no one else in the world is qualified to be the Emperor of Heaven. The two most qualified people in the world do not want to be the ruler of the world. The reconstruction of the Great Xia imperial court naturally came to an end in failure. It should have ended here, but there were discordant sounds again. They were not aware that Ashura and Indra had already refused. He began to speak out righteously against the re-establishment of the heavenly palace. Some even believe that it was the heavenly court that was determined to save the goddess Kaguya. This angered the Otsutsuki clan, causing them to encircle and attack the enemy, resulting in great suffering to the people. The heaven is high above, and it regards human life as worthless. It is a sinner in the world. The fuse that triggered everything should not be established. Once these words were spoken, they caused a huge uproar. The remaining core forces of the Great Xia imperial court took decisive action and launched a war against another faction. The war intensified, and finally even the ninja clan was involved. Indra was so angry that he laughed when he heard the news. If the Emperor of Heaven had not merged his body with the sacred tree in his early years, this world would have ceased to exist long ago. The Emperor of Heaven was alone in the starry sky fighting against 5 Otsutsuki. Where were they? The energy fluctuations emitted by the light can cause great suffering to all living beings in this world. Has the Emperor of Heaven saved them more than once? If we don't save the goddess of the moon, will Otsutsuki let this planet go? This is ridiculous. Indra felt an unprecedented rage, and his immediate thought was to restore order. All those traitors who wantonly slander the Emperor of Heaven, commit treason, are ungrateful, and forget to be humble should be beheaded. But he was stopped by Ashura. Ashura thinks this is too radical. The world had just experienced a great war, and the population had plummeted, and it had not yet recovered. It is really not suitable for our own people to engage in internal competition. Are you just going to let Lord Tiendi, your grandfather, be talked about like this? The disappointment was clearly visible in Indra's eyes. I don't want to either, but humans can't stand internal friction anymore. Although Ashura's eyes were dim, they were still firm. Indra has been studying ninjutsu for many years, so he doesn't have a deep affection for the world. He even thought that following that figure and unlocking his seal was everything. Ashura is just the opposite. With the transfer of chakra, the development and growth of the ninja sect and its frequent contacts with the world made him increasingly understand the importance of love and peace. One of the two people is extreme and the other is rational. One is extreme and only values the affection and emotions of those around him, and does not care about other people at all. One is full of love and justice, considering the overall situation of the world, and shining with the glory of the Virgin Mary. It is hard to tell who is right or wrong, they are all firmly walking their own path. But they both felt that the other's path had narrowed. You've gone crazy with the chakra passing thing, haven't you? Have you forgotten whose chakra this is? Are you talking about feelings with a bunch of ants who don't know what gratitude and humility are? Indra was furious. The world that the Emperor of Heaven has worked so hard to protect cannot be destroyed again. Ashura answered just as firmly. Is this world worth protecting? It's unreasonable. History always repeats itself. Even without the instigation of Black Zetsu, the two have completely different attitudes and views on the world. This also led to a war between them breaking out. But history is not always the same. In this world where Yu Yi exists, the final result was that Indra won a great victory. It's actually not difficult to understand. At this time, Indra already had an unswerving goal and was no longer obsessed with worldly power, the so-called leader of the ninja sect like in the original work. However, he practiced and improved his strength more diligently than in the original novel. In addition, he was already a natural genius. Moreover, he would study Yu Yi's works from time to time, which broadened his horizons and improved his thinking. But it makes up for the shortcoming of the original work's weak mind. On the other hand, when we talk about Ashura, we have to talk about a person, or a toad. A dream of the emperor's life and death ceremony. From then on, I dared not dream about my life. Ever since his last dream in which the Emperor of Heaven was in a state of uncertainty about life and death and the whole world was in sorrow, Toad Pill has had shadowy dreams. Even though he later dreamed that the battle between Indra and Ashura was about to cause changes in the ninja world, he did not stand up and teach Ashura sage mode like in the original work. But fate always follows its own path, and Ashura himself eventually found Mount Maiboku. Since Ashura is Yuyi's descendant, his grandson, Gamamaru eventually taught him sage mode, but it was much later than in the original story. He was not very proficient in the technique, and when the war came, it was naturally impossible for him to be a match for Indra. At that moment, Indra stared at Ashura with a pair of scarlet Mangeki Sharingan in disappointment. Stubborn! And 9 tails beneath him snorted in disdain. Chapter 73. 9 tails came to help Indra voluntarily, as the largest part of the chakra that Yuyi had differentiated, he naturally stood on Indra's side. The majesty of the Emperor of Heaven could not be violated. When it was still Yuyi's chakra, it fought on the battlefield with Yuyi and fought against powerful enemies from outside the domain. The memories engraved in its bones made it feel overwhelmed every time it thought of them. It wanted so much to follow that figure again, so how could it tolerate others blaspheming the Emperor of Heaven like this? Therefore, with the participation of 9 tails and their full support and cooperation, the complete Susanoo teamed up with 9 tails and naturally won the victory with a crushing advantage. Even when Ashura used the Buddha's transformation technique in the end, he was no match for the opponent. As payment for your failure, I will take one thing from you, Indra said. Then he left directly. As for what was taken away, it was naturally Ashura's cells. In the book left by Yuyi, there is a method to obtain Rinnegan. At this moment, he wanted to completely inherit his father's power so as to gain more possibilities to open the seal. After that battle, Indra was extremely disappointed with the world. But after beating up Ashura and venting his anger, he finally regained some of his sanity. He gave up the idea of punishing the world. But he eventually broke with Ashura. He took some of the disciples who shared the same philosophy as him and moved out of the ninja sect. At the same time, a family called Uchiha was created. You can do experiments there with peace of mind. At that time, Ashura, who was beaten by his brother, learned his lesson. He looked at the moon in the sky in confusion and said to himself, Lord Emperor! Father! Have I done something wrong? Perhaps this world is really not worth protecting. He murmured. But he still didn't give up, and still wanted to protect the peace created by Yuryuki. At the same time, he did not give up on finding a way to break Yuyi's seal. Thus 2 families were created. The Senju clan, who are dedicated to protecting the world created by the Emperor of Heaven and promoting love and peace, an Uzumaki clan that specializes in studying and cracking the Emperor's seal. In addition to the annual Kixi festival, they would go to the moon together to commemorate the Emperor of Heaven and the Goddess of Mao. And visit Hago Romo Hamura. There was no intersection at other times. Since then, the ninja clan has fallen apart and gradually evolved into various major ninja clans. Many years later, Ashura and Indra were both very old, they do not have the complete Satsuki bloodline, the level of life has not transformed, and the vitality is gradually decaying. But in the end, Ashura died before his brother, and until his death, Indra never forgave him. Indra was left alone in the world. At this time, he successfully cultivated Ashura's cells and awakened the Rinnegan. With the help of the Rinnegan, he is doing one last experiment. Ha ha ha! I found it! I finally found it! So this is how the sealing technique works. Indra was already very old and his body was about to decay. But his expression was excited and his eyes were filled with tears. As his life was coming to an end, he seemed to have figured out the sealing technique left by the Tsutsuki clan at the last moment. But Indra is too old now. His body's functions are not enough to support him to come to the moon and break the seal. There was no other way, so Indra came to the back of the Uchiha clan alone. On a stone tablet, write down the method to break the seal. He first wrote, I am the eldest grandson of the Emperor of Heaven, Indra. To break the seal, you need to summon the chakras scattered among the human world by the Emperor of Heaven. At the same time, someone with the Rinnegan needs to use the Gedo statue to reunite the chakra of the 9-tailed beasts. Become 10 tails Jinkraki, gain 6 paths level power, then use this chakra as a guide. After he finished writing, he was still not satisfied, so he carved a magic circle on the stone tablet. Only the younger generations who possess the power of the Mangeki Sharingan can see the entire contents of the stone tablet. Because he felt that collecting the chakras scattered in the world was not an easy task. At least you need to have the power to open Mangeki to touch it. After finishing writing, he breathed a sigh of relief. The body ages rapidly and extensively. Before this, his body had long since decayed and his chakra had dried up. For so many years, I have been hanging on by my breath because of my inner obsession. At this point the obsession is fulfilled and the deadline is approaching. He was like a candle in the wind, trembling as he finished explaining his affairs. Then he walked to the courtyard alone, staring at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. Finally, he took a pot of wine and, imitating his father's example, toasted to the bright moon from afar. I raise my cup to the bright moon, and my shadow and I become three. Lord Emperor of Heaven, if it is possible, how I wish I could be born in your era, to accompany you, to fight with you, to shed blood in the starry sky. He muttered to himself. I did it, but I couldn't wait until the day you fully recovered. His vision was blurry and the traces of life were fading from his body. With the passing of Indra and Ashura, an era came to an end. With them here, suppressing the world with the invincible power of the time, the world still ushered in a brief peace. But with their death, the anger that had been suppressed until now finally erupted as never before. The majesty of the heavenly emperor cannot be violated. The people headed by the Uchiha clan, as descendants of the heavenly emperor, they want to settle accounts with mortals, but they were stopped by the Senju clan who uphold love and peace. As descendants of the Emperor of Heaven, why don't they protect the Emperor of Heaven but instead protect the traitors? The Uchiha were furious, and had long been unhappy with the Senju clan, and eventually, it turned into a war between the two clans. In the mortal world, the Great Xia Imperial Court was never rebuilt. They believe that without the rule of heaven, the Great Xia Imperial Court that cannot unify the world does not deserve to be called the Great Xia Imperial Court. As a result, the remaining forces of the Great Xia Imperial Court gradually evolved into 5 major countries. The people who were once the core of the Great Xia Imperial Court, the elders, led by Tianyu Pavilion and Xingyi Pavilion, formed the Fire Nation. The will of fire is everlasting, representing the eternal will of the Emperor of Heaven. At the same time, they will never forget the war that spread across the starry sky. That is a deep hatred engraved in the blood. The same is true for the other 4 kingdoms, each representing the different wills of the Emperor of Heaven. This is an unspoken concept among everyone. The war between the Uchiha and Senju clans continues. Even the other ninja clan members who separated from the ninja clan, they also began to take sides and participate in this war. They all regard themselves as descendants of the Emperor of Heaven and believe that they are the true inheritors of the Emperor of Heaven's will. Since then, disputes have continued. And no one expected that this war would last for 1,000 years. As they fought, they almost forgot about the former Emperor of Heaven and Heaven. They don't even know why they started the war in the first place. But they only know that their relatives and friends all died at the hands of each other. There are reasons why we have to fight. As time goes by, there are more and more ninjas left in the world. But the world has never been unified and conflicts continue. 1,000 years later, the Sengoku era began. 2 peerless monsters appeared from each of the Uchiha clan and the Senju clan. Chapter 74. Time flies, like a fleeting moment, and in the blink of an eye, 1,000 years have passed. The world has become much smaller than before. It is so small that it is surrounded by the sea on all sides and can only accommodate the 5 major countries and some ninja clans. But for some creatures, 1,000 years pass in the blink of an eye. In the past 1,000 years, in addition to making chakra spread all over the world, this led to the rapid development of the ninja community. It also caused many summoning beasts that had once separated from the Snow-Wind realm to they can now live in harmony with humans. They participated in human wars in an alternative way. At this time, not only did the Uchiha and Senju clans have unparalleled monsters, one of them had been seriously injured in that great battle. The creatures that have fallen into slumber will eventually wake up. In a valley, 2 young men, who were highly regarded by their families, a war broke out here, the nth time. There were only 2 ninjas, or 2 young men. Wearing red armor, they crossed each other in the air. One of the young men had waist-length hair and a handsome and childish face. His eyes were bloodshot, and 3 black megatama were slowly rotating in his eyes. The other boy had shorter hair, a strong face and a solemn expression. Both boys are relatively young, but their chakra amounts are already astonishing. The 2 of them approached each other, leaving after images in the air, and it turned out that they were competing in physical skills. Boom! The handsome boy with long hair threw a punch, but the short-haired boy blocked it with his leg. Their strength was amazing, and as soon as they came into contact, the air was shaken directly, causing a wave of air. Then, they started a series of dazzling physical competitions. Although they are young, they only have this level of physical skills. It is also enough to make the older generation of ninjas ashamed and feel inferior. Boom! They exchanged punches in the air again, and were simultaneously knocked away by their own strength. Taking advantage of this gap, the two of them began to quickly form seals with their hands. Fire style, great fire extinguishing technique. Instantly, a flame as high as 20 meters spewed out from the mouth of the long-haired boy, directly covering the entire sky. The red fire wave seemed to burn everything as it attacked the other young man. Facing such a huge flame, the young man did not seem panicked. Instead, he quickly formed seals with his hands. Wood style, wooden wall. I saw a tall wooden wall about 30 meters long and wide rising from the ground, blocking the flames. Squeak! The huge flames burned on the wooden wall, causing a chemical reaction instantly. There were huge waves of air rising up, and the air was filled with smoke. And in this gap where his vision was blocked, there was another figure beside the boy using wood style. It's the long-haired boy. I saw it past wood style and came to his side. At this moment, his eyes were bloodshot. The kunai in his hand attacked the blind spot behind the short-haired boy without hesitation. Bang! Just when the long-haired boy thought he had succeeded, the short-haired boy who was hit turned into a piece of wood. The handsome long-haired boy frowned slightly, and the three-tomo Sharingan in his eyes slowly rotated. At this moment, a sound of breaking air came from behind. Without thinking, he immediately squatted down and adjusted his position. Swinging the kunai, stabbing behind him, squeak! The weapons collided, and the two kunai collided with each other. Under the powerful force, sparks flew. They stood there in a stalemate, staring into each other's eyes. The scarlet three-tomo Sharingan looked at the firm and resolute eyes. Hashirama! Don't let me see you on the battlefield next time! The long-haired boy shouted, a hint of ferocity flashing in his eyes. Madara, I don't want to be your enemy. Senju Hashirama said helplessly, with sadness in his eyes. They could have been great friends. However, due to the different positions of their families, they can only be enemies. The war has lasted for 1,000 years. Are you still dreaming of your ridiculous peace? Uchiha Madara is a laughing stock. Hashirama remained silent, but his eyes were as firm as ever. They didn't say anything more, and fought against each other again. Although these two young boys are still quite young, they have already displayed extremely amazing talents and physical skills, and their combat thinking is even sharper. However, they were evenly matched and neither could do anything to the other. Roar! And at this moment, a roar that echoed throughout the universe came from the depths of the canyon. This roar was filled with vicissitudes and eternity, and was filled with a supreme aura that seemed to be able to easily capture people's hearts. Following this roar, a dazzling beam of light shot up into the sky. It goes straight into the sky, shaking the heaven and the earth, and is extremely dazzling. And at this moment, the whole earth began to tremble. Squeak! Madara and Hashirama exerted their strength, repelling each other and stopping the fight immediately. He looked at the beam of light rising into the sky with shock. What is that? They asked absent-mindedly at the same time. But no one could answer them. Because the whole world was in fear and panic at this moment. In the beam of light, a silver figure was seen rising straight up along the beam of light. It is impossible to describe how beautiful and noble that species is. The silver scales shine brightly from a distance, it has two horns on its head and an unusually handsome body that stretches for miles. Following the pillar of light, it stands upright in the sky and on the earth. It was like a silver bridge connecting heaven and earth. It was so shocking that it was indescribable. At the same time, a suffocating and eerie atmosphere spread throughout the world. This breath is supreme and powerful, with nobility in the blood. As soon as it appeared, it swept across the world, causing all things to tremble in fear at this moment. Madara and Hashirama could not describe the shock they felt in their hearts. Even they, under this huge momentum, my body couldn't help but tremble, it was like a mortal facing the vastness and terror of the power of heaven. But they gritted their teeth and restrained themselves with amazing willpower. But they didn't know that besides them, their old father was also trembling. The Senju clan. What is this? Senju Butsuma muttered to himself. As the head of the Senju clan, he had power beyond cage level. At this moment, in the face of the powerful aura emanating from this noble species, one could not help but tremble. At this moment, he felt like an ant facing a god. The only entity he could think of that could have such power was once a legendary entity, heaven. Some distant and vague memories began to revive from his memory. He was worried for a moment. If the legend was true about the heavenly palace, where would the Senju clan go? Uchiha clan. Heaven. Lord Emperor of Heaven. Lord Dragon God, has revived. In contrast to Senju Butsuma, Uchiha Tajima, the head of the Uchiha clan, was in tears. Although the Senju clan may have gradually forgotten their origins over the years and regarded them as just stories and legends. However, the Uchiha clan, who are extremely sentimental, have an almost fanatical worship of their ancestors. Therefore, every head of the family passed down his origins, as well as the stories of his ancestors in heaven from generation to generation. This is also the secret that every family head must first understand before inheriting. They were absolutely certain of the existence of heaven from the beginning to the end. At this moment, such a huge momentum came, and Uchiha Tajima was shaking with excitement. Except for the former members of the heavenly court, there was probably no one else who had such power. Lord Dragon God has revived. What about our ancestors? What about Lord Heavenly Emperor? Has he revived? As a descendant of the Emperor of Heaven, Uchiha Tajima almost always fantasizes about returning to the glory of the heavens ruling the world. Instead of constant disputes like now. With the revival of the Silver Dragon, the whole world fell into a state of constant tremor, and everyone had their own ulterior motives. But the long-lasting war finally stopped at this moment. The Silver Dragon did not stay for long. It tore through the sky, soared straight up, broke through the clouds, and came to the moon. Its huge body began to fly and circle around the moon, slowly entangling the entire moon. Compared to the past, its body is much, much larger. From a distance, it looks like it is embracing the entire moon. Ouch! A chirping sound was heard. The sound was filled with joy, compassion, and even longing. At this moment, a huge hand appeared out of thin air on the moon, covering the sky and the moon. Touch it gently, its body began to stop trembling, but its silver vertical pupils were still sparkling with crystal tears. Roar! The roar once again spread throughout the 9 heavens and 10 earths, echoing in the depths of the starry sky for a long time. An unimaginable chilling aura emanated from it, causing even countless nebulae and asteroid belts to shake. It did not stop, and took a last deep look at the moon, filled with an indescribable emotion. The huge body began to fly into the depths of the starry sky. It was a silver dragon. After thousands of years, it finally turned into a dragon. Now, it will go to the ancestral temple of Otsutsuki to settle accounts. Chapter 75. Yi congratulated the silver dragon on its transformation into a dragon. This former partner has gone through thousands of years and is finally undergoing a transformation. The nobility in its blood would not allow it to suffer so much and then not be able to get back at it. Now, it wants to settle accounts with the Otsutsuki clan. But even if he succeeds in transforming into a dragon, how could the ancient tree rooted in the starry sky in the ancestral temple of Otsutsuki be so easy to deal with? Before that, even though Yi had killed 99% of them, but the Otsutsuki that still exists today, there are at least 100 people who have eaten the complete chakra fruit and possessed the Sharingan of the Rinnegan. After all, Otsutsuki is already an interstellar civilization. Even if the population is declining, the tribe has no fewer than 1 million members, but the Otsutsuki have a strict hierarchy. Most of them are also civilians whose chakra is not strong. There are thousands of Otsutsuki who have eaten the chakra fruit completely. That is equivalent to thousands of Kaguya with the power of the Rinnegan in the original work. Originally, this number should be much higher, but most of the chakra fruits were sacrificed to the ancient tree. The tree is incredibly powerful. Therefore, Yi couldn't say whether Silver Dragon could win this time. During this 1,000 years, Yi suffered from the severe cold of the solar eclipse. The moon's revolution and rotation in this vast starry sky brings about a huge temperature difference between day and night. It is something that ordinary people cannot resist, let alone continuing day and night for thousands of years. The changes brought about by the body are only secondary. Yi's will became increasingly corrupted, and his mind became blurred. This is because, for thousands of years, he did not choose to resist the corrosion of the sacred tree, but took the initiative to endure it and let it go. Not only that, in addition to the corrosion of the sacred tree, there is also backlash from the power of faith and the consciousness of heaven. In that battle, he went to rescue Kaguya, which attracted the siege of the Otsutsuki clan. This disaster was supposed to happen in the Boruto story 1,000 years later. But it was almost brought forward because of him alone. Causing the loss of lives and the people to suffer, because of that war, almost all the resentment accumulated by the whole world was turned against Yi. His soul is now constantly filled with distracting thoughts from people before they die. The cause and effect is so profound that his condition is even worse than Princess Kaguya in the original work. He did not resist all this, but let it happen. It's more like self-punishment. Before that, he was waiting. As the consciousness of what was waiting for him grew more and more blurred, it seemed that the end was finally approaching. And now, he finally waited for. You chose option 2, repay part of the karma of the Hokage world, seal yourself for 1,000 years, and suffer the bitter cold of the solar eclipse. Reward, incarnation. The long-lost reminder from the system appeared before Yu Yi's eyes. This is the change in rewards brought about by the choices made when facing desperate situations. And those desperate situations trigger more options than just these. When Kaguya was captured, no matter how Yu Yi reasoned, the result was certain death. The Otsutsuki ancestral temple is terrifying. Just eating the whole chakra fruit, there are no fewer than 1,000 people who possess something similar to the Rinnegan. Even though most of them are scattered on other colonized planets, there are still hundreds of people left in the ancestral home. In other words, he has to face hundreds of people who are no less powerful than Princess Kaguya in the original novel. With his strength, rushing into the ancestral temple to save people is undoubtedly a foolish dream. And just then, the system options arrived. Kaguya-sama is facing a life-or-death situation. What is your choice at this moment? Option 1, you force yourself to calm down. Knowing Otsutsuki's strength, you choose to give up rescuing Kaguya. Beauty is good, but the country is more beautiful. Mission completed, reward, Scion bloodline. Option 2, even though I have no regrets about dying, all the karma has been imposed on me. I will immediately go to the Otsutsuki clan to rescue Princess Kaguya and give her a chance to survive. Mission completed, reward, a broken sage art from an unknown plane. Option 3, find a place to hide, don't save yourself, and marry another one. Reward, immortality, avoid all disasters. Note, option 2 will cause the Hokage world catastrophe to come earlier, and karma needs to be repaid. Please choose carefully. At that moment, even Yu Yi's mood was slightly disturbed. Compared to the dilapidated sage art, options 1 and 3 are undoubtedly unimaginably tempting. But neither of them could save Kaguya. Even if you put aside your personal feelings and choose these two, it will cause great problems in your state of mind. The Scions are a warlike race, fighting to survive. Even though I have Scion blood, I still feel fear at this moment. It will also cause a permanent crack in the state of mind, and a Scion who is afraid of fighting will no longer be called a Scion. Even in Dragon Ball, even a strong Scion had his entire planet destroyed by Frieza. What is strong is never bloodline, but the individual and the aura of the protagonist. If he avoids fighting now, his life will end here. Moreover, in his opinion, the Scion bloodline also has disadvantages. The power system in it is the same as that of Chakra, both of which pursue the ultimate destructive power. Even in terms of changes, it is not as good as Chakra, which evolved from Yin-Yang and the 5 elements. The two have one thing in common. It has almost no help in increasing or decreasing your lifespan. Even someone as powerful as Sun Wukong only lives for a few hundred years. None of them can achieve immortality, so it cannot be considered the Great Way. What is the Great Way? The heaven and the earth have the same lifespan, it is indestructible through all eternity, and it is detached from the material world. To put it bluntly, both of these are mortal systems, but they are mortals who are ultimately powerful. Lack of pursuit of state of mind and understanding of the great truth. Option 3 is a path to becoming a saint, although it can help you avoid disasters and achieve immortality. It is the goal that many people, even immortals, spend their entire lives pursuing, but it is not what he wants. He can avoid all disasters and live forever, but that doesn't mean the people around him can do the same. That kind of life is too sad and boring. So, even if we put aside the factor of Kaguya, based on the reward alone, he would choose option 2. Even if it was a dilapidated sage art, he would still find a way out. This is the only way for him to understand his true self, destiny, and even the origin of the system. What's more, because of Princess Kaguya, it is even more impossible for him not to choose. But broken is broken after all. Even Yu Yi only did it at the last moment. After witnessing Kaguya die to save him, he was overwhelmed with grief and finally realized the truth. He relied on his amazing talent to complete the study of sage art. And with his state of mind, he has already relied on the power of creation and destruction contained in the Sharingan of Samsara. And through the understanding and application of natural energy and chakra, before I knew it, I had gained enough understanding of the laws of the Tao. This also gave him enough foundation to break through one level after another. Therefore, once you have an epiphany, your strength will basically be qualitatively improved. If we only use chakra as a power system, after eating the chakra fruit, his strength has basically reached its ceiling, and there is limited room for improvement. The strength of each person who eats the chakra fruit is not much different. The difference is only in the application of strength techniques. It is naturally impossible for Yi to rely solely on chakra to explode and kill all the Otsutsuki in one go. What really changed his strength was the power from the immortal cultivation system. Only then did they successfully break into the ancestral temple of Otsutsuki. But then I encountered that tree. Otsutsuki plundered and condensed the chakra fruit from countless planets. Basically, most of them were sacrificed to the tree in the starry sky. It has absorbed countless powerful vitality from different planets. Incredibly powerful. Even Yi was defeated in the end. Even now, the injuries have not recovered. In addition to the choice of cultivating immortality when saving Princess Kaguya, he later made another choice and gained Kaguya-ji's chance of survival. You chose option 3, fight to the end and enter the Otsutsuki Ancestral Temple. Reward, Kaguya-ji's glimmer of hope. Kaguya-sama's soul has been torn into pieces. However, under the influence of the system, the Hokage world's heavenly Dao collected the remaining souls again, allowing them to experience reincarnation. This is also the reason why impure world reincarnation and outer path cannot be summoned. Because Kaguya-sama's soul is no longer complete, being able to repair the soul is something that only the immortal cultivation system can do. So Yi is waiting for Kaguya-hime's reincarnation, waiting to repay the karma of the Hokage world, using the incarnation to get rid of the erosion of the sacred tree. And now, part of the karma in the Hokage world has finally been repaid. He finally waited. You chose option 2, repay part of the karma of the Hokage world, seal yourself for 1,000 years, and suffer the bitter cold of the solar eclipse. Mission completed. Reward, incarnation. The cultivation system was added to explain the protagonist's strength, to make him and Silver Dragon unique, and to distinguish him from Hago Romo Hamura, Six Paths Madara, etc. The rest of the story will still focus on the Hokage plot. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you are notified of future uploads. You can find the next parts in the playlist visible on the screen or on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.